I'm Nirupa, and on hi, sorry. A very good morning, everyone. I am Nirupa, and on behalf of GBPN and ABLA, I thank you all for being here and joining us today for the launch of the Healthy, Affordable Housing for a Sustainable Future white paper. It is undeniable that the time is opportune for a discussion on healthy homes, specifically in the affordable housing sector, for three big reasons. Firstly, with the rapid rate of urbanization in India, millions of houses are yet to be built in the coming decade for lower income groups in the cities. Secondly, the onset of threats of climate change makes crucial and urgent the need for climate responsive measures for adaptation in the built environment. Increased instances of heat waves coupled with stress faced during COVID-19 pandemic make this a pressing need for the health and well-being of residents. Lastly and most importantly, as the Bureau of Indian Standards prepares to revise the National Building Code, it provides us a timely moment for action to mandate provisions for health and well-being of millions of prospective residents of low-income affordable housing in urban areas. Acknowledging this timely opportunity, the Global Buildings Performance Network, GBPN, launched the Healthy Affordable Housing in India project. Led by Ashok Bilal Architects in collaboration with the Indian Institute of Public Health, Gandhinagar, and Monash University, Australia, the project proposes standards for health, well-being, and climate resilience in the design and construction of affordable homes and neighborhoods in urban India. It puts forward recommendations in the form of a white paper for the coordinated enhancement of policies, programs, building codes, and building regulations. Before proceeding with the team introduction in today's program, I would like to invite Dr. Peter Graham, the Executive Director of GBPN, who is joining us online to share with us the opening remarks for today's events. Over to you, Dr. Graham.
Well, thank you so much. And it's a great honor to be here to launch this really important initiative. I am really delighted to be able to be here in such esteemed company, even though I'm online, and I hope that everybody in the room can hear me well. The GBPN launched this project in 2021, initially with a basic question, which was, how could we accelerate the adoption of climate appropriate building regulations that are going to improve the lives of the maximum number of people. We looked first of all at the evidence base in literature around the relationship between building performance and health outcomes globally, and we identified that there clearly was an evidence base in seeing better thermal comfort leading to better health outcomes, and the corollary also that poorer thermal comfort leads to poor health outcomes. And one of the things that was really evident in that research was that there was a big gap in understanding what was going on in the global south, and in particular in countries like India, where there is a huge demand for affordable housing and very aggressive climatic conditions. So that's really where we started this process, and then we've worked over a number of different phases of the work to develop an understanding of the evidence base in India, and then to do field work to identify what are the actual living conditions like in affordable housing in the state of Gujarat, which gave us an indicator that indeed there needed to be regulatory reform in order to protect the health and well-being of the lives of hundreds of thousands of people. And when we look at the future and why it's important to have these guidelines now, we can see that India is experiencing rapid urbanization, and that we've got about 40% of India's population residing in urban areas, and that is increasing. We've seen that this push for increasing affordable housing has really been driven by a concern for provision of housing at speed, and that in terms of design and performance, perhaps that desire for speed has come at the expense of some health outcomes. And this is really what we're trying to address. We've got a situation where vast numbers of people are moving into cities looking for housing, which is often overcrowded, poorly ventilated, leading to unhygienic living conditions. And because of the pace of urban migration, we couldn't overstate the urgency of having to address health performance in affordable housing. So we are really keen to see these guidelines influence the revision of regulations for affordable housing design in India, and really happy that this project has gained the attention of the Bureau of Indian Standards as well. There's also a component of this which relates to the economic well-being of families, and one of the things which really struck me when I was looking at the results of the fieldwork phase of this project was just how the overheating conditions in some apartments were influencing not only the health of families, but also the safety of families. And, this is a major issue because, of course, the mobility of people and the aspiration of people is really negatively affected when they don't feel safe. And it's a very distressing situation to see documented as well. There's the economic impact of poor thermal performance in buildings as well. And one of the a number of countries who are expanding the electricity grid and the access to electricity for communities, we can see from the experience of countries that haven't taken care of the energy efficiency of their housing stock, that increased connection of inefficient cooling systems, air conditioners and so forth, leads to grid instability and blackouts, as well as increasing the energy cost of providing comfort in homes for people. Now, if you're in a situation of lower income, the percentage of your income that needs to be spent on energy bills is a significant issue. And we've seen not just in India, but in many countries, a rise of energy poverty, particularly in the last year or so, with the impacts of the war in Ukraine and so on. And ameliorating that can come back to providing well-designed, thermally comfortable, affordable homes. So this white paper that we're here to launch today is really an important piece of regulatory infrastructure for India, and I think it's also an example for many other countries that are facing similar challenges in warm climates with rapid rates of urbanisation and increasing demand for affordable housing. This white paper provides something that could possibly be transferred and adapted to other countries, and again lead to really positive outcomes for millions of people. So to close my remarks, I just would like to reiterate that the GBPN sees this as the beginning of the next phase of a project, which is almost a call to action for the implementation of guidelines in affordable housing at speed and at scale. We know from other work that this is not going to lead to increased economic costs, but rather increased savings in the economy as well. So thank you all. Thank you to the team at Ashok Bilal Architects and to Ashok, and to colleagues at Monash University and our team in India at GBPN for driving this project forward and bringing us to where we are today. And on behalf of GBPN, I would like to say that we're standing with you all to support the implementation of these guidelines going forward. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Dr. Graham, for those insightful words. I would like to now introduce you all to the project team. The project team consists of 4 key organizations: the Global Building Performance Network, GBPN, which is the funding agency and project coordinator for this project; Established as a think tank in Paris in 2011, it works as a system wide network organization implementing projects for policy reform, technical assistance, and education. GBPN has been working in India since 2018. It has been working on developing evidence based data for the building sector. It is also supporting governments and the industry with resources for policy change and implementation for climate resilience, health, and well being. Monash University, Australia. Monash University is an international research intensive university that works on delivering education and research excellence across the Indo Pacific. A lot of their work has been focused on addressing climate change and fostering thriving communities. In the Healthy Affordable Housing Project, Monash University has supported as the international research partner, facilitating the review of best practices with a focus on health and well being. Ashok Bilal Architects. Ashok Bilal Architects is the implementation lead for this project. The architecture firm has been known for its commitment to the principles of environmental sustainability and social responsibility. It is now recognized internationally for its innovative contribution to affordable and resource efficient sustainable design at all scales of development, from townships to institutional campuses to housing and individual buildings. The firm has not only designed and executed several affordable housing projects, it has also researched and developed building typologies, low carbon construction systems, and design and construction guidelines for affordable housing in India. Indian Institute of Public Health, Gandhinagar. We have with us the IIPH Gandhinagar as a consortium partner on this project. It is India's first and largest public health university. It works to strengthen the health system in India through education, training, research, and advocacy policy initiatives. Today's event is divided into 5 sessions. Session 1 and 2 are an introduction to the white paper and its key findings by Ashok Bilal and Girisha Sethi from Ashok Bilal Architects. Session 3 is a guest speaker interview and presentation. This will be followed by a 15-minute tea break. We will resume with session 4, which is a panel discussion on the challenges and opportunity in healthy affordable housing, moderated by Mr. Ashok Bilal. This next session, session 5, would be the white paper launch, followed by closing remarks by GBPN, after which we would proceed to the hall for the networking lunch. Let us now begin the first session, Introduction to the White Paper by Mr. Ashok Bilal. Mr. Lal is the team lead for the Healthy Buildings project and founder and principal architect of ABLA. In the 4 decades of practice, his firm has established a reputation as one of the pioneers in sustainable and energy efficient architecture in India that is focused on evolving innovative solutions for the Indian context. Mr. Lal has been a devoted academician and over the last decade has also supported and conducted research towards low carbon futures for urbanization in India. Please join your hands in welcoming Mr. Ashok Bilal on stage.
Thank you, Nirupa. Well, I think Peter Graham has laid the background quite fully for us, but I don't think I can do without re-emphasizing some of the points raised by him and stating them in a rather crisp and forceful manner. So what we are doing now is actually we are looking at the built environment or the environment yet to be built for the poor sections of our growing citizenry. That's our focus. And we do face an unprecedented situation which needs our most urgent attention and a proactive strategy. We cannot afford to be behind the times. We cannot afford to first get into a problem and then see what we can do about it. We need to be ahead of it. Needless to say, and we all know it fully well, that climate change is absolutely upon us. And we all know, we have all experienced one way or the other, the impacts of climate change on our lives. We can see around us everywhere that towns and cities are growing rapidly. This is the largest national transformation of the 21st century. Its scale is enormous. We haven't seen anything like this in the world. We also see and feel, and we've been talking about it every single day amongst ourselves, that the environmental quality of our environment, of our living conditions, deteriorates with urban growth and urban development. And our environmental security is at risk. So, who suffers most? It is the poor communities that bear the brunt of this process. And that is why it is very important for us to focus on the need on their needs. So the need for adequate, decent shelter, especially for our bottom 1/3 or even half of our citizenry, is something that we need to be looking at. And that need is running away from us. It is accelerating. We are behind the curve. And we've been talking with friends who are trying to get into affordable housing space, but are unable to do so because of certain conditions, policy conditions, or economic conditions in the country. So the question that we ask ourselves is, can this process of urbanization be designed, now mark this word, can this process of urbanization be designed, not simply being allowed to express itself, but be designed as an engine of economic advance that reduces inequities by design, ensures long-term sustainability and resilience to climate change? Can we think of urbanization process as this process? And of course, to serve the well-being and comfort, especially of those at the bottom of our economic ladder. So this white paper is an attempt to answer this question through some pragmatic actions. What is a pragmatic approach? The pragmatic approach is to respond to this unprecedented situation, and it is to take stock of where we are at realistically, to be frank and clear about it, right? And then look at the present trends of urban growth and housing and place them, measure them against our global pronouncements of where we want to go. And let's say there are 3 or 4 big slogans. One of them is housing for all. Oh, it's a great slogan, isn't it? But my goodness, where are we going for housing for all? I'm not sure about that at all. The next one is we are committed to the Sustainable Development Goals. The process that we follow must meet any of those 12 objectives, of which 6 or 7 are very particular to the urban growth as well as to housing. Climate action. So far, the big climate commitments that have made and the reducing carbon emissions commitments that have been made have been seen at a very sort of large scale. It's mostly about transition for the energy sector, mostly about that, and some of it to do with production of materials and technologies and so on. But I think the urban world and how to design for its future has really not looked at it systemically. Okay, it hasn't done so. So we got to put these realities against our ambitions and then find what we must do next. So to do next, we must build upon our available existing institutional framework of policy, of regulations, of programs, taking into account our limited economic resources. So the pragmatic approach will say, now what is the next step I can take from where I'm at? Not to say this is where we need to go, but to say what can I do next with what I have already. And I'm not going to wait for the World Bank, where's our World Bank friend, for our World Bank or the Asian Development Bank or the global community and climate exchange, financing, etc., to be showered upon me. I'm not going to wait for that. I'm going to take the next step at home. That's what we must be doing. That's what this white paper is all about. So we proactively catalyze a process of alignment of policies and programs to serve these ambitious goals and our global commitments. So it's really about tweaking our policies and programs, aligning them, putting in some important factors into the need for raising the standards or the aspects with which we can improve the conditions of life of so many people who are going to be living in our cities. Now, of course, health and well-being, especially paying attention to the needs of women and children and the aged, is one of the crucial aspects of this work. And this unprecedented situation of growing densities, even though we're talking about urban housing, densities and congestion continue to grow. That in itself is a source of psychological and social tension. This is running away from us simply because somebody has written some arithmetic solutions about more and more building on less and less land. Okay, I'm not sure we're going to commit our populations, city populations, for the next 70 or 80 years, with whatever we build today, as if this was inevitable, I don't think we should be doing that. To bring this awareness to our doorstep and to also look at what's happening in cities and to the city populations, we have the advantage of working with Dr. Gulecha here from the Institute of Public Health at Gandhinagar. I think for the first time, at least I am realizing how a health policy and an urban development and housing policy need to talk to each other and align themselves one with the other. And we are very also lucky to have a global perspective of research from Monash University in Australia. And of course, my team, Ashok Bilal Architects, as well as IIPH, would like to thank GBPN for instigating this work, talking to us and raising this question, saying, are you prepared to work on this? Do you think this is important? We think it's important. Do you think it's important? Would you work on it? They instigated it and then gave us all the support that we needed. So I must thank them for that. And of course, the great news is that the work that we have done so far is taking, some concrete shape. But we've been encouraged by the Bureau of Indian Standards, who have accepted the white paper in principle and said, come, let's work together, convert this into technical clauses that can be then recommended to the committees that are going to revise the National Building Code. So I think that's a really encouraging and heartening step. So now I would like to hand over to my colleague, Girisha Sethi. Girisha has hurt her knee, but she's brave enough to come and present the paper to us. Girisha is an architect and an urbanist who has been working now for a few years on the issues of housing in urban areas. Girisha, over to you.
Thank you, everybody. I'm Girisha Sethi. As a part of Team Ashok Bilal Architects, I've been working on the Healthy Affordable Housing Project. And I will, in the next few minutes, take you through a summary of the white paper that we present today. The white paper, as we already spoke in the introduction, comes at the overlap of three critical issues that India is faced with at the same time in today's time. Rapid urbanization taking place in India and the consequent demand for affordable housing, It is projected that over 50% of India's population will be urban by 2050. In that time, we're adding 416 million urban dwellers to the cities that are expanding and growing. This puts a huge demand for affordable housing in urban areas. As per estimates, the shortage of urban housing was already 29 million in 2018 compared to 18 million in 2012, and it is anticipated to grow up to 38 million in 2030. The largest proportion of this housing shortage and this housing demand is confined to low income groups comprising of the EWS, economically weaker section, and LIG group, the low income groups. Under the Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana Urban PMAY, 12 million houses have already been sanctioned, but half of them are yet to be built. So, in the coming decade, we are looking at a very large footprint of affordable housing to be built in urban areas. This creates both a challenge and an opportunity to create an impact. So far, in the government policy and the practice, the focus has been on rapidly delivering the housing units that are in demand in different cities. In this quantitative approach, the qualitative aspects such as climate appropriateness, health and well-being, the environmental impact of the buildings that we are creating ends up being neglected in the rush to deliver the numbers. The houses that will be built in the coming decades as a part of the Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana will last for several decades and thus have the opportunity to impact both resource usage as well as the well-being of inhabitants. So we're not only talking about creating a more environmentally sustainable built environment, but we also have the opportunity, or we may make the mistake of not providing for the well-being of the urban population that we're expecting. At the same time, we're also faced with the threats of climate change. Most part of India are hotspots of extreme climate events. These include heat waves, floods, and other climate events that have been impacting us. There's data that shows by the end of 2100, 4.4 degrees Celsius is the temperature increase expected in India. The IPCC already recognizes that lower income groups and the poor population of Global South end up bearing the harshest brunt of this climate change, given limited resources, given difficult living conditions. In that context, there is opportunity for designers and builders to adapt passive design strategies to help fight the discomfort faced by low income groups in the face of climate change. This is also paralleled by increase in incidence and duration of heat waves across the country. This is more harsh in urban areas given the urban heat island effect, which increases temperatures in many cities up to 50 degrees Celsius. Besides the health hazards, there's also an expected rise in the demand for energy in the affordable housing sector. The survey conducted by GBPN in several households in Gujarat and in Karnataka suggested that people aspire to have more energy-intensive equipments as their incomes rises, and that creates a latent demand for energy that can be expected in the near future in the buildings that are to be built for low-income groups. This makes the need for passive design and energy-efficient strategies important and also a window of opportunity. Lastly, the third layer of this complexity is the poor health and well-being that is observed in lower income groups, both in the formal and the informal housing sector, as the impacts of climate change affect most the health and well-being of those that are poor. This often creates a cruel double blow for people living in lower income housing, as many of them are also home-based workers, especially women. So it not only affects their health, it also affects their productivity. The current trends in affordable housing have been towards a high rise and high density building development. For small homes with large household sizes, with a large number of family members, this ends up creating social and psychological stress, which is felt acutely by women, young girls, children, and the elderly. The high rise and high density housing create a loss of privacy, a loss of sense of safety for women, and it ends up creating a sense of alienation and confinement for elderly and the children that end up being confined to small homes at a high rise apartment. Thus, at the overlap of these concerns, we develop our research and our white paper. So, the white paper aims to address how, in the context of rapid urbanization in India and the demand for affordable housing for low income groups, we can deliver design and construction action points that co benefit climate change adaptation and mitigation, and at the same time contribute to better health and well being for the occupants of low income groups. A special focus has been given on a gender perspective to address the felt needs of women as well as children, and that creates the broad framework that the white paper is based on. The white paper addresses the concept of health and well-being for affordable housing through a holistic approach. The idea of health is taken forward from mere physical health to include determinants and aspects of social and psychological health. The white paper sets standards for health-related parameters in the design and construction of affordable housing that can co-benefit the objectives for climate change adaptation and mitigation at the home level and the neighborhood level for affordable housing. The white paper puts a special focus on the felt needs of women, elderly and sick, children, as well as their need for better social space, for secure social interaction. And finally, the white paper puts forward institutional recommendations for upgrading the policy framework, the codes and regulations required to formalize and institutionalize the recommendations within a regulatory framework. The white paper came out of a one-year-long research project that was supported by the GBPN. The project started with inquiring what really is a healthy, affordable home, what are the international perspectives on that, and what are more context-specific definitions for healthy, affordable homes in the Indian context. It then researched into opportunities that exist within the framework of policy, codes, regulations, and green building rating systems to see where there is already provisions for health and well-being and where provisions can be proposed and incorporated easily. The white paper research also encompassed a pilot study on the model of a living lab, where certain existing affordable housing projects were studied, the occupants were talked to, and the performance was analyzed to understand the core concerns that are faced by residents in affordable housing. The same was also tested and demonstrated in two live projects of affordable housing that were during the design phase, soon to be constructed, to demonstrate the feasibility of the recommendations that we researched and came up with. And finally, the white paper that we present today puts forward recommendations for several planning and policy instruments that can incorporate the guidelines for health and well-being easily, that can be administrated and implemented viably. These include the National Building Code, the Model Building Bylaws, state level, development control regulations, and green building rating system. These are the 4 projects in Gujarat that were studied. The occupants were talked to through focus group discussions. Special attention was given to how the women and children felt in these existing projects that were put by the government and private developers, to understand how certain features of the built environment, of the design of the building and the building complex, impacted the physical, social, and psychological health of the occupants, and to address what were their urgent needs and concerns. The white paper also addresses and recognizes that there already exist certain state-level provisions and initiatives that the government has committed to or has proposed, which already create a window of opportunity to plug into and complementary initiatives that support what we're talking about. India's commitment to align its objectives with the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals is one of them. We already have sustainable goals for sustainable cities, for gender equity, Goal 3 for health and well-being, Goal 11 for climate action, which already create an existing framework to align our efforts with. India's commitment at the Paris Agreement under the nationally determined contribution is another opportunity for alignment. India has pledged to achieve net zero by 2070, and efforts to create better and sustainable built environments in the affordable housing sector can significantly contribute to that. India, in its updated NDC, has also pledged to achieve 45% reduction in the carbon intensity of its GDP. That is another scope for alignment. Moreover, the National Housing Bank has allocated funds for green outcomes under its affordable housing finance, where it would soon be mandatory for a lot of projects that align and associate with the housing finance to produce green buildings and more sustainable built environment. So that becomes another incentive for developers to step in a more sustainable direction. The Prime Minister's Committee for Climate Change has also put forward the National Action Plan for Climate Change, which has 8 different missions. One of the missions is, in fact, on sustainable habitat, which says the habitat should be more than just a building and it needs to incorporate the living conditions of the people. So that is another complementary initiative that our project aligns with. The Bureau of Energy Efficiency has put forward the Eco-Niwas Samhita as design guidelines for energy efficiency for multi-storied residential building, another scope for alignment. And finally, the Disaster Management Authority puts forward heat action plans at city level and state level, which many cities like Ahmedabad and Nagpur have pioneered and are already taking action to respond to instances of heat waves that have been prevalent in the last few years in many cities. Under these initiatives, we propose that as we move forward to build a large building footprint of affordable housing, we integrate strategies for health and well-being. But before we could understand the strategies, we started with the question what really a healthy building means, specifically for an Indian context. We looked at international definitions, we looked at international literature, and there were definitions of many kinds put forward by international organizations. What we understood was that internationally, there was a lot of focus, especially after COVID, talking about indoor environments that were artificially controlled in the developed world. They were talking about instances of sick building syndrome, indoor air quality, air exchange rate, communicable diseases, active cooling, and other such instances. Where we actually were difficult to address the issue that we are talking about was that there were little said in a theoretical framework about healthy buildings for developing contexts, especially for low-income groups, where majority of buildings are not fully closed and artificially conditioned. So what kind of a definition can we develop in that context for our Indian cities for lower income groups? We approached that concept in a holistic way, that to be able to define healthy, affordable homes, we need to take into consideration 4 determinants of health: physical health, social health, psychological health, and resilience against climate change, which can be extended to resilience against pandemics as well. We developed indicators for each of the 4 determinants of health, which would be applicable not only to an individual home, but to the entire resident community and the entire neighborhood of affordable housing in India. The idea was not to come up with extremely innovative and technology-intensive indicators, but for pragmatic indicators that can be incorporated easily in our context in the buildings at little to no cost. So for physical health, the indicators we put forward include thermal comfort, visual comfort, and protection from diseases. For social health, we put forward social interaction for communities' social fabric to be maintained, gender equity, taking into consideration the needs of women and giving them a role in deciding their living conditions and life as a community in these complexes, and adequate space, a very critical indicator here, where we propose that it's important to question the densities that we're talking about in these projects and question what incentives contradict healthy densities and affordable housing. For psychological health, again, we put forward limits to in-house densities and in-house crowding, and also look at sense of privacy and sense of safety, especially for women. We propose access to nature in different forms in affordable housing projects as a very important indicator. And finally, aesthetic choice and flexibility to manage and organize their indoor and outdoor environment. Finally, for resilience against climate change, which we extend to resilience against pandemic, we propose indicators of protection from disruption, adaptation to climate change impact, and preparedness in case of different kind of disasters. Each of the indicators are further developed into actions which can be integrated in different policy and planning instruments in a holistic way. For physical health, the actions include optimizing the integration of climate responsive passive design and low energy devices to maximize the duration of indoor thermal comfort. This is relevant both in the context of rising temperatures and heat waves, and also in the context of limited resources of air conditioning at the stake of the people that live there. Secondly, we have the action point of optimizing the availability of diffused daylighting during different times of the year in all habitable spaces. The survey we conducted in the different affordable housing projects in Gujarat showed that 70% of the household did not have adequate light in their living areas, in their indoor areas, and that became a big point of discomfort, and it also added to energy demands that could be mitigated with natural daylight. That was also seen for thermal comfort. Most houses that were, especially on the top floor, faced extreme heat during the summer months, received heat from their roof that was not insulated, and that is where climate responsive passive design becomes a very important and simpler strategy to implement on ground. Another concern was of waterborne diseases like dengue and malaria. So in that sense, it's important to ensure drainage of all exterior surfaces to avoid waterlogging. The indoor spaces should also be protected from mosquitoes with very simple and cost-effective resources like netting. It is important, especially in the context of COVID, to enable good ventilation in all habitable and indoor spaces, to think about the air exchange that the indoor spaces have, and also remove dampness and humidity in the space to avoid growing of respiratory issues that come out of mold. We also propose that the neighborhood and the resident area should be protected from air pollution and noise pollution, both in the design and orientation of the building, in the siting of the building, and creating buffer zones from heavy traffic and noise areas. For social health, it is proposed that to promote the social health, there should be adequate outdoor and common shared spaces for social interaction, group activities, and recreation. There should be sheltered space as well for children and youth to gather and enjoy the space outside, given the limited space in their indoor environment. We also propose that for community health and resilience, there needs to be a resilience center in every affordable housing complex to provide protection and care for the vulnerable population during pandemics and heat waves that are experienced during summer months. The concerns of women with respect to their hygiene, need for healthcare, and workspace for home-based workers should also be incorporated. And in the operation, management, and maintenance of the community assets, women should be able to play a role and decide how the living condition and the built environment overlap. Finally, we propose that inside the home, there should be a minimum standard of space per person and not per family, in the common spaces within the buildings as well, and in the habitable outdoor spaces and terraces. For psychological health, one of the critical proposals is to limit occupant density in the site to avoid overcrowding and offer them means to balance the need for social interaction with the need for privacy and personal space. We propose that there need to be positive open green spaces in the complex. Terraces and roofs can be used for the same purposes. Balconies should be integrated in all households, and there should be room for them to grow and tend to plants in their open spaces. Finally, we propose there should be flexibility in the design of the structural system, one that becomes a difficult concern when we're talking about precast, fast construction, in a way that the internal spaces can be planned flexibly by the residents as their family size and their needs grow with time. For resilience against climate change and pandemic, we propose there should be additional measures in the design and provision of additional facilities, both at the building level and the neighborhood level, for resilience during periods of extreme event and pandemics. There should also be protection of habitable space against flooding, something we saw in Delhi quite recently, how the contamination was quick when water started flooding from the river. And there is also important that the housing complex has a reserve store of drinking water to meet the requirements of the community during periods of extreme events. We, in the previous phase, worked with 2 projects of affordable housing to demonstrate the viability of these recommendations. One of the projects is here as a reference, where we incorporated the different recommendations for thermal comfort in the built environment. What you see right now are the existing layout and energy loads, annual energy loads through different months of the year of the building complex, the top floor of a certain building complex that we worked with. When some of the recommendations for thermal comfort were incorporated, the building cooling load and lighting and thermal comfort changed drastically, as you see in the next figure, creating a 30% reduction in the cooling load of the building as well. So the strategies not only helped create a healthier built environment for the residents, it also curtailed the cooling loads in different parts of the building through the year. In the white paper, we recommend that the determinants of health, physical, social, psychological, and resilience, the several indicators of health that we put forward, and the different actions for healthy buildings and neighborhood be integrated in an institutional framework and be mandated at a state level. It should come together in a unified and harmonized way in different scales of planning, instrument, and policy, starting from national level policies, codes and programs, to state level regulations, to urban local body level bylaws, as well as into green building rating systems. The recommendations say that the different instruments of government that are associated with the affordable housing sector should be enhanced in a coordinated manner, in a way that their objectives are aligned with one another. We do not propose a drastic shift in the institutional framework or the existing instruments. We only propose a more coordinated effort to integrate guidelines for health and well-being. At the national level, the policies that have a bearing on the health and well-being of affordable housing include the National Urban Habitat and Housing Policy by the Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs and the National Health Policy by the Ministry of Health. We propose that their objectives should be aligned at the top level to start with. Within the Ministry of Health, Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs, we have the National Building Codes and the Modern Building Bylaws. We propose that they should also have a coordinated extension to incorporate aspects of health and well-being and resilience to climate change, as these codes and bylaws were developed before the extreme impacts of climate change were felt as strongly and urgently as today. The Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana, the flagship mission for affordable housing in India, is also expected reformation and upgradation at this stage. So we propose that the minimum standards of Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana, its provisions should include minimum standards for health and well-being and bring together all forms of group housing under an upgraded National Building Code and Modern Building Bylaw, specifically for affordable housing, to include objectives of health, well-being, and climate resilience. On the right-hand side here are the identified planning and policy instruments that are targeted, that need alignment. Here we propose an institutional coordination framework and a regulatory framework that could ease this process. We are not here trying to represent an administrative hierarchy, but more the flow of policy action through the different scales of operation from national to city, to state to city level. So at the central government, we have the Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs and Ministry of Health and Family Welfare. Within the Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs, we have the Habitat and Housing Policy, and we have programs like the Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana and Amrut. We propose that the National Urban Habitat and Housing Policy need to be closely aligned with the health policy, which is under the Ministry of Health. We also propose, as you see the other arrow, that the National Building Code, which is put forward by the Bureau of Indian Standards, and the modern building bylaws, which is put by the Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs, need close extension and alignment in a coordinated manner. This would also then reflect in the urban and regional development plans that are formulated for a city scale, the development control regulations that are for different states, and local building bylaws which are administered at city levels. We also already have the heat action plans, which are currently under the Disaster Management Authority, implemented at a local scale. We propose that it needs to be integrated with the national health policy and also with the local building bylaws for a coordinated effort. The roadmap we propose for the way forward, the first step includes the enhancement and coordination of the habitat and housing policy with the health policy in context of climate change. Our second key point that we'll be working on in the coming months is setting guidelines for the enhancement of the National Building Code. It's a great window of opportunity that the National Building Code, which was last put forward in 2016, is due for its upgradation in the coming 2 years. And that gives us room to talk to the Bureau of Indian Standards to consider the guidelines in the awaited review process of the National Building Code. A specific focus is on the code for low-income housing as a part of the Development Regulation, Part 3 of the National Building Code, and Part 11 of the National Building Code, Approach to Sustainability. We also put forward that the modern building bylaws be developed for affordable housing and be coordinated with the enhanced National Building Code. And finally, requesting the Town Planning Institute to enhance the regional development plans guidelines with reference to urban housing, affordable housing for health and well-being. Here we have a summary of the specific recommendations and action points we put forward for the different policy instruments. For National Building Code for resilience and physical health, we propose that the Econivas Samhita, which is already developed for thermal comfort for residential building, be made prescriptive in the National Building Code, giving minimum standards and solutions for walls, windows, external shading, and roofing for ease of implementation. So we don't propose a new development here, but just connecting the dots for what already exists. The National Building Code, we propose, should also incorporate provisions for mechanically aided ventilation, mandating roof construction with reflective coating and high insulation for cool roofs, using roof-mounted solar PV for its multiple benefits, so as a resilience measure against events of disruption, and also one that promotes the cool roof at the same time. We propose including protection of homes from mosquitoes and vermin, in a way that certain design features are included at little to no cost to allow that. We propose the design of on-site drainage for no stagnant water, minimum buffer of land to minimize pollution, and provision of emergency water storage and resilience centers. Likewise, we put forward a series of action points for social and psychological health. These include minimum standards for accessible shared space in the community. A very critical point is the prohibiting FAR incentives that contradict social and cultural appropriateness and environmental sustainability, as the research reflects that higher FARs not only create a larger carbon footprint on the ground, but also create social and psychological stress as buildings start going taller for smaller families. We propose provisions for including women in post-occupancy management of community resources. Another critical point is limiting building heights to stilt plus 4 stories as a fundamental requirement, because the research reflects that anything above that not only increases the embodied energy, the operational energy, but also is less resilient to disruption. It's more vulnerable to climate change impacts and also creates social and psychological stress for the occupants. We propose that the density of housing units, the dwelling units per area of land, should also be limited to avoid overcrowding. Another critical point we put forward is how the hard paving, vehicular access, and parking spaces should be reviewed to limit them in a way that they don't compromise green and soft ground in the building complex. We also propose reviewing fire tender, again to optimize better green spaces to be provided in the building complex. And finally, permitting flexibility in the partitioning of internal spaces in a way the residents have the choice to move walls around when the family requirements grow. Perhaps also have the opportunity to combine two smaller apartments into one as their family requirements change. Similar action points are given for the model building bylaw in a way that it is coordinated with the National Building Code. At the state level, the development control regulations have a bearing on the regulations on which the developers develop without questioning them. We also propose that certain state level regulations should also be reviewed, like the buffer between the housing and the pollution zones, the regulations for FARs, the regulations for building heights and densities, city level regulations for requirements for hard surfaces, for pavings, for parking, again to maximize green spaces and offer a better built environment in a way that the health and well-being is not compromised by the restrictions put forward by the state regulations. Finally, we propose that green building rating systems like GRIHA, IGBC, and EDGE also incorporate in them measures beyond the green building aspect of affordable housing to include minimum standards for health and well-being, as their certifications offer incentives to different builders in the construction process. These also include aspects of waste management, solar potential, drainage, ventilation, emergency water storage, shelter resilience center, and protection from different disasters. In that sense, we propose that these technical recommendations be incorporated at different scales of operation, from the national level to the state level to the green building system, to create a harmonized institutional and regulatory framework that allow private developers and public bodies at the local level to adhere to minimum standards of health and well-being. At this stage, we are working on translating the recommendations into quantifiable, specific, administrative, and easily implementable technical clauses which can be included in different instruments easily and be implemented with little cost. We are working on translating them as technical clauses for the upcoming revision of the National Building Code, and we would request the Bureau of Indian Standards to consider them in the technical review committees of different parts of the National Building Code. A specific focus is, like I said, on development control regulations, especially requirements for low-income housing and approach to sustainability. In the coming months, we would also be working with two real affordable housing projects under the Living Lab model, again to demonstrate how what we propose for the National Building Code can be delivered on ground. And we'll be working together with the different partners to create healthy building guidelines in a way that it can be put together as a consolidated document for everybody's access and use. We would also be working with architects and builders for a capacity building seminar to make sure that our research reaches ground through different resources. I thank you all for listening to a rather elaborate summary of the white paper, and we have some guests with us who would like to share their experiences from the ground, and I'd invite Nirupa to take us forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Girisha, for the very informative session. As part of this project, to better understand on ground the opportunities and challenges for institutionalizing and implementing strategies for healthy, affordable housing, the recommendations given in this white paper will be taken up by one private and one government developer. In this regard, this session opens the conversation by inviting on stage our guest speakers, two professionals from the building and construction industry. The session will be done in two parts. In the first part, our guest speakers will give a brief presentation of their work, through which we will gain an insight into the on-ground realities of affordable housing construction. This will be followed by a dialogue with our speakers, moderated by Mr. Ashok Lal. I would like to begin the session by inviting on stage our first speaker, Ms. Anjani Patel. Ms. Patel is the founder of AO Environmental, an organization dedicated to addressing diverse facets of sustainability and energy-efficient building initiatives. She also plays a pivotal role in her family owned businesses, Environ and Aryanpur Realty, which have developed several residential buildings across Ahmedabad over the last 25 years. With an academic background in building science and technology and a master's in environmental engineering from the University of Washington, she works on the ground to combine her expertise and passion for a sustainable built environment. Over to you, Anjani.
We laid the foundation of our first project in 1996, starting with a 5-story residential building. Since then, we have developed more than 5 million square feet of spaces across Ahmedabad, most of them ranging from commercial to residential to industrial. Most of our projects have been multi-family housing projects, ranging from 1 BHK 500 square feet apartments to 5 BHK 7,000 square feet apartments. Today I'm representing the combined experience and views of our company developing houses for various income groups over the past 3 decades. Over all these years, our design philosophy has always been centered around upgrading the occupants' life and comfort. Providing ample green spaces, as you can see, has always been at the forefront of our design. Even at our industrial project, we provided vertical gardens and sufficient landscaped areas. Talking about Aram, our affordable housing project, the project is a 1 and 2 BHK housing project. The 1 BHK apartment has a 450 square feet carpet area, and the 2 BHK apartment has a 550 square feet carpet area. There are a total of 434 units. It is a G+14 structure built on an 8,000 square feet plot and has 7 blocks spread across 4 towers. There are additionally 11 shops that are designed in a way that they are isolated from the residential area to maintain the privacy. When it came to designing Aram, which was an affordable housing project, our design philosophy was no different. Our aim was to incorporate our design principles from the luxury housing segment in a way that the cost of each unit doesn't go up. At the same time, it's economically viable for the developers. As you can see here, we've provided more than 20 common amenities like the gym, the toddler park, the senior citizen park, the skating ring, the yoga deck, the indoor games area, the library, baby crash, cricket pitch, etc. We've also provided computers and printers in the common areas for everybody to have free access. One of the most important features of the project for us has been the 5,000 square feet podium garden, as you can see here, with a movie screen and an air-conditioned banquet space provided for their social gatherings. As we were discussing about the Resilience Center, I think this banquet space can provide a great area to do so. We had to actually reduce 2 apartments that we could sell, but I think it was totally worth it in the end. There's supposed to be 2 pictures here. I actually had 2 photos here to show what narrow corridors can do to affordable housing. No? Okay. Maybe if I have time in the end, I'll show you the photos. But this plan will do for now. So basically, the foyer to your apartment is very important in setting the tone for the overall living experience. So most of the affordable housing projects around us have a very narrow corridor with a lot of apartments lined together. What this does is this takes away the privacy of the residents. We've made sure that we have no more than 2 apartments in a line, and then we have a huge foyer space for these apartments. This does give them a sense of privacy as well as luxury. Coming to the ENS Eco-Nivas Samhita study for our project, I have the numbers here for anybody who wants to refer to them, but I'll quickly summarize the findings. we were easily able to achieve the window to floor ratio, the visual light transmission, and the thermal envelope requirements for the project. However, the thermal transmittance for roof was something that we faced an issue with. As you can see, the requirement was 1.2, and our project is achieving 5.2. So there was a huge gap. We did try to come to some practical solutions for rooftop insulation, but most of them were very expensive, and with thin profit margins that affordable housing projects have, they were nearly impossible to incorporate. Another recommendation was a rooftop garden, but there again we have solar panels on the rooftop, so that was not possible. Coming to some of the building services recommendations that they made, the common area lighting and the exterior lighting requirements were easily met. However, the regenerative drives that were recommended are not really feasible for residential projects, as well as the transformers. The recommendations around transformers that were made were not feasible as the utility providers own them. There were some features like the motors, the energy efficient motors, which are again too cost intensive for such projects. The indoor electrical end use, the indoor lighting fans and air conditioners are not typically provided by developers. But we did consider providing them, but that only led to higher upfront costs, so we did not go ahead with it. The solar water heaters again bring up the operation cost, and so we did not go with that as well. We have a rooftop solar with a capacity of 38 kilowatt installed. The energy monitoring system, or BMS system, again was way too cost intensive for our project. Where it comes to the electric vehicle charging, we really wanted to incorporate that recommendation. However, the challenge we faced was metering these EV charging points to individual units, because the entire society bearing the cost for a few charging points would make no sense. So that's one of the reasons we could not do it. But however, that's one thing we would really like to do going forward. Here are some of the additional measurements we took. We have a STP installed for 100 KLD capacity. We have 2 rainwater harvesting wells, which cater to 100% surface rain runoff area of our project. We also have garbage composter machines. We have segregation bins. We also have 2 lifts per tower, and then one of the lifts does accommodate a stretcher. With these things that we were already incorporating, I would just like to add that it was easy for us to register and hopefully get certified as a green building project. So I do see a synergy between the building code in Gujarat, the ENS, and the green building guidelines. I think that's it. I would leave you with some photos from our project, just to showcase how we have ensured that we have enough light and enough ventilation. Thank you.
Thank you, Anjani, for your presentation. I would like to now invite on stage our next speaker, Ms. Bhavya Shetty. Ms. Shetty is currently the CEO and director of PG SETI and has a background in construction technology and management. Her vision is to make construction technology more efficient to meet the large demand for housing in India. In 2005, Mr. M.G. Somashekar, her father, introduced monolithic construction for the government sector to provide fast-track quality homes for lower-income groups. This was implemented in several mass housing and commercial projects across Bangalore. Following in her father's footsteps, she has an ardent desire to make the technology more efficient to meet the huge demand for housing and commercial buildings in India in the near future. I invite Bhavya now to join us on stage.
Thank you, Nirupa, for the introduction. A very good morning to everyone here. I'm really delighted to be a part of this event to share some of our projects and what we have done so far with all of you. Hopefully, we will be able to contribute in any way, in any positive way, for the objectives of the event Mr. Ashok sir has put forward. So I'm Bhavya, and I come from a company called PG Shetty in Mysore, and Bangalore is where we operate from. And our company has been in construction. We've mostly been construction contractors for nearly 5 decades now, and especially in the last 10 to 15 years, where we worked predominantly on the housing sector for different government agencies. And we have built nearly 2 million square foot of housing, especially for EWS and LIG so far. And having worked with different government agencies for so long, for nearly 10 years, is where. Sorry. So, having worked with different government agencies, having delivered houses for Slum Board, for Police Department, and Bangalore Development Authority, so we have worked with a variety of agencies, and we felt in affordable housing there's still so much more scope that to improvise the design, which was not basically feasible in the government projects, where we were bound by a fixed floor plan that they were giving us, and we had to just stick to it. The only thing which was demanded from us was to deliver faster homes at a affordable price. That was the only requirement from the government agencies, nothing else. So having worked with so long, we felt there's definitely scope for improvement in our design, scope for improving the quality of people in these affordable homes. And that is where we ventured into starting Mysuru Community Biosphere, which is basically a private entity which is going to be building affordable housing. And so main objective of this company was to build comfortable, sustainable, and very reasonably priced houses for especially the LIG and MIG category. And Mysore being a place where community is the heart of the city, and people are so much oriented towards community activities and to be know your neighbor, be around, create some events, take part in these events. That's the culture of Mysore. So keeping that in mind, we wanted to make community living as the heart of the entire design, and that's where we started off. And of course, adopting the fast track technology that we've already been using, so we make it more efficient and deliver faster without compromising on the quality. And of course, the other intention was also how do we reduce the not just the cost of the product, but also the maintenance cost for the end users who are going to be living in these apartments. So these are some of the projects we have delivered with different technologies. We've also worked with different technologies. One was aluminum formwork, which is basically, it's called Maivan in India. Maivan is actually a manufacturer. And of course, precast is what we moved to from that. And we have delivered nearly 3,500 to 4,000 units, like I said, 2 million square foot of affordable housing. And with all this, the last project is what is our upcoming project Avni by MCP, which is going to be starting very soon. And that's where is our first private developer venture. So why as an engineer, why did we get into technology in the first place? I just want to give you a quick note on that. So like we understood from Girisha also initially, by 2050 urban population is going to be skyrocketing up to 50% of the entire country's population is going to be here. So we have very less time for delivering nearly 400 million housing goals to be delivered, especially for LIG MIG category in only the low cost sector itself. Forget about the other section of housing. So to deliver that, we have to come out with, we have to treat housing like a product out of, let's say, an assembly line manufacturing process, a process-driven product, rather than just looking at, how do we build, what are the ways of building it. And so we wanted to come out with technologies which will make it more efficient, faster, and also the consistent in quality of whatever you deliver as the first product and the last remains the same without compromising on that. And that we saw only in car manufacturing, right? So every car which comes out of, there's a set process, everything is fixed technology based, and then the product which comes out of it, no questions asked. If it's a car from Toyota, you're getting a good product. A car from Suzuki, you're getting a good product. So based on your budget, you have the brands that you deal with. So similar to that, we wanted to also drive housing as a product where, of course, in mass housing, especially in this sector, modularity is also something that we look at, and which also comes with how to still keep it probably partly flexible internally for people to work around their workspace as they grow along with the house. So keeping that in mind is where we introduce different technologies, and also, like I said, monolithic, and then we moved to precast, and also we've been experimenting with one more technology called EPS panel. So this is again a sandwich of concrete and polystyrene in between, which also increases the thermal and your acoustic of any enclosed space, basically. So this is our project, Avani, and we have 2 blocks. So like you can see, community spaces are heart of our design. That's what we have always concentrated on. And the block building 1, what you see is surrounding 2 courtyards, which is the lung of the entire project. And a lot of green space could be created, and a lot of community activities, the celebration of some festivals, or so many activities that could be conducted here. So this is a typical unit plan of a 650 square foot of carpet area for a 2 BHK. So this is our community, and like you can see here, we've tried to provide as much as possible. Our footprint have not crossed more than 40%, so that we have some lung space around the building, and create a lot of common spaces and community spaces to engage all age groups of people, from elderly to children's to even the spaces have been created for co-working for the present generation too. And you can also see these entire roof is being covered with solar panels. Basically, we are looking at generating power enough to take care of complete common space power requirement in the project. And these are the amenities that we have incorporated in our project. So we have provided piped gas not only for cooking, but also for water heating for the bath. And there is, of course, like I said, solar harvesting for power generation. And then we have provided charging points for electrical vehicles, because EVs are going to be the future. So, and medicinal herb garden, central courtyard, and then rainwater harvesting, of course, nearly 2 lakh square liters of water will be harvested, and waste recycling. Our entire wet waste will be recycled within the community and then reused for manure. And biological sewage treatment, we will be completely treating our sewage, whatever is generated of the project. And of course, to have a sense of every house in Mysore before used to have a backyard with a guava tree or a mango tree or something. So to just give a little to the kids of the community, an orchard of all the local variety of fruits. And of course, yoga center. So this is some pictures of the house model flat that we have done with the 650 carpet. And with this, we also have a lot of challenges as private developers who are dealing with affordable housing as of now. And predominantly in that, when a housing has to be made affordable, it's not just a builder's problem, but we feel it's 4 pillars who form the entire community. One is, of course, the designers. A good design is very efficient. A very efficient design is the first and foremost foundation of any affordable housing project. And then comes the builder, the way you build and the quality you can deliver it with. That is another. And of course, the government has to play a bigger role also into it by regulating the land prices, or maybe even coming out with cost benefits for tax benefits and things like that for builders. And of course, the 4th one would be the finances. So all of them have to work on one common page, where we can come out with a very I would say useful and really a good solution basically for our future housing requirement that we have for the next 5-10 years, where we have to really cater to nearly 400 million housing units. And that's where we feel it's important for all of us to come together. And that would be it. Thank you for your time.
Thanks for the presentation. As you mentioned, I'm Kanagraj. I'm an architect and working as a building energy efficiency person, professional now. So talked about monolithic construction, and now you are moving towards, let's say, a
Precast.
panel. So this is the transition which most of us would like to see,
Okay.
because as a building energy efficiency person or person looking at thermal comfort, we all realize that the monolithic construction is not the way forward.
Yes.
So because you are transitioning towards that, and you are also working with the same umbrella, and you have case study already in monolithic construction and the new construction coming in, probably the leading lab should come up with some numbers which basically distinguishes this performance both thermal as well as energy wise to really see the difference. Because as I would understand from all the community who work in building energy efficiency space, we all feel quite strong views about my one construction. Okay, so probably a case from your side can emphasize or say that how much better we are without that. Because I know a case in Chhattisgarh where my one construction affordable housing has been given back by the people who are residing this because it is too hot. So probably a good case for all of us to see that our developer or builders within the framework.
Sure. Okay. Yeah. So basically, precast and monolithic both have the similar issue, like you have brought out. It's completely concrete. But having said that, precast, monolithic and precast in both for high rise, the EPS panel is still not a great viable solution when you look at. But what we can do is we can do a hybrid model out of these two, where we have the entire structural members in precast or monolithic, and then you figure out the internal walls and everything to be in EPS panel, which also reduces the cost of your structure because it brings down your structural weight itself, and additionally thermal and acoustic comfort, of course. So yeah.
Come take a seat. Well, thank you very much for joining us and giving us your perspective on what you've been doing. I'm really struck and very, very inspired by the fact that here we have two professionals who are getting things done on the ground, facing the reality of life, and really wanting to do the right thing. We somehow have created a picture in our minds about the builder, the devil builder. All right. I think here's an inspiration. You just turn it around. And I would say this is the new generation that is taking over the building trades. And here's a great representation of the new generation. So let's give them some applause.
Thank you. Thank you, sir.
Many interesting points were raised. I had some prepared questions, but I think something new has cropped up as you were presenting, and it's we should discuss them a little further. Kanak has already broached the subject. Scale, speed, and quality of construction. That's one side. And an environmental quality, which both of you also address, which you, Anjani, focus on a lot, and the pictures show it very, very nicely, is another aspect that you want to somehow say must also be delivered. I contrast your images with pictures that I showed, or our study showed, of some of the affordable housing projects that have been built over the last decade in Gujarat. All right, world of difference. While on the one side we see an approach to rising densities and greater, let's say rising densities, still trying to maintain an arrangement of relationship between inside and outside space, right? Which creates the sense of community as compared to lots of towers and lots of blocks with no space for kids and anybody to be around. Do you think, can I ask first you a question, that this is something to do with the capability of a designer or designer skill, as against anything to do with regulations and bylaws. Do you think that's what it is?
Yeah. So I strongly feel it is definitely to do with the designer to start with. A good design can do wonders because our in our first venture also our concentration has always been on community spaces. How much more open space, how much more community space can we pull out here, and also connect the entire people who are going to be living in this apartment to nature, to ground, rather than just be inside a concrete jungle. That has been always our agenda. And a good design definitely can change people's interaction, their participation in the community, and also their health intangibly is what that can definitely affect these people. And there are policies from government also. End of the day, we feel policies can only do half the job. The rest is from the designer and also the end users, who whatever is being designed also need to be some way motivated to maintain that for the life of the project. That is another part which will actually complete the picture, where the people living there also in some way are incentivized. For example, when for our project, we're aspiring for gold rating, and these whatever from the IGBC, and whatever rating we get also is only for a couple of years, 2 to 3 years, and you have to renew it. And unless the community is intending to renew it, to continue to do maintain the sustainable amenities that has been given, the green initiatives which have been taken, even the design is of no use. So it's only the half battle won when we have done a good design by a designer. The rest of the battle is how do we motivate the people to continue what the designer intended with this structure. That's what my opinion.
Anjani, I noticed that in the project that you showed, you had these tall buildings. There was a ramp, there's a podium, and all the parking was taken underneath. And on the roof of it, you had a green space. All right, and that was the way you dealt with the requirement of both parking, high density with parking space, and yet giving green environment. This was possible at a certain cost level, presumably. But if you went down 15 or 20% below that cost or affordability level, then there would be a challenge. It would be difficult. Do you feel that even if you were to deploy really good, so it's a very good design strategy, the way it works very well. Buildings around the edge, consolidated open space in the middle, parking underneath. Simple but effective, and you can see the results of it. Do you feel that there's something about density, FSI, number of homes, parking demand as per the regulations, and the competition for economical, simple, open space that produces, which is a catch-22, right? So if you're talking about affordable housing and you insist on certain parking regulations and access to fire timbers and attenders and whatnot, would there be a limit to make it affordable to the number of houses you want to put on a piece of land, the FSI limit? What do you think?
Thank you for the question. So as we were discussing yesterday, as a developer, for it to make economical sense, we have to utilize the complete FSI that's given to us. Especially in Ahmedabad, we face really high land costs suddenly. So it just makes sense that we maximize the saleable area. Having said that, the pictures that I showed, the reason I highlighted the podium garden is surprisingly, it did come at a cost, but it has reaped benefits instantly. We've been able to sell better. And so I feel tangibly, intangibly, there is a fine line, like it needs to be calculated, which we haven't done. But when you put these additional costs and these additional design features, I think you get the benefits back. And so I think it's absolutely important that these green spaces are incorporated along with maximizing the FSI. Does that answer your question?
Partly.
Okay.
Yeah. Sure. Yeah. It's like taking the FSI for granted. That's what we are doing.
Yeah.
Because yesterday, again, there was a very interesting discussion. This is the Ahmedabad experience at the moment. Because Ahmedabad is now in the master plan an outer ring road, and development beyond the outer ring road had not been declared as urbanizable space. On the inside of the ring road is urbanizable space. So demand for that land has increased enormously. FSIs have been increased. With the increase in the permissible FSI, the land prices have been going up steadily. And in fact, what we're saying is risen 3 times compared to just 10 years ago. That's the increase. So 45% of the saleable price or the selling price is accounted for by the cost of land paid by the developer in the open land market. All right. So we have this contradiction. Professor Rao, you might want to say something about this. We have this contradiction between FSI, land market, cost of provision, and affordability, right? And yet we want to maintain certain ideals of environmental quality. Would you like to say something about it?
Yes. Thank you. See, this is a kind of a vicious circle. If you don't increase the FSI beyond a certain point, then there will be a shortage in terms of land, because you can't accommodate more than a certain number on a given parcel of land. So even then the prices are going to increase. If you increase the FSI, the prices are going to increase, as you said, because you need to recover. So either way, it's a win-win situation for the builder and a lose-lose situation as far as the common man is concerned. So probably one way could be that, like you said, amongst all the recommendations in your white paper, if I can just digress a little bit, there was one very strong recommendation that you made about limiting the height of affordable housing units only up to G+4 or G+3. I think that's a very, very strong recommendation that is going to come, and hopefully it will be accepted. I'm sure there will be a lot of resistance to this from the developer community, because they want to recover the land costs, because they can't price it so high. So therefore, maybe the commercial and institutional FSIs could be permitted much higher, because you can have a 40-storied office building, or you can have a 30 stories hospital or whatever. So all those kinds of buildings, please by all means go for higher FSI or FAR, but not in the residential segment, because there are health issues, there are psychological issues, and so on and so forth, like what they did for all the post-war housing in the US or in Europe. Many of those tall towers actually had to be pulled down because they're just no good. So therefore, maybe residential, you need to limit the FSI or the FAR up to a certain point, taking everything into consideration. And then for those developers who want to really make a killing in terms of profit, then you start playing in the commercial space. And for those who are okay playing in the affordable segment, let them remain in the residential sector. So that could be one kind of an outcome, because ultimately for businessmen it's about making money. So if you are so keen on making money, then you play in that area. And if you want to provide good quality, good design housing, then probably you remain in this.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. How are we doing for time? We're tight. Or just one very important thing that I want to raise is Bhavya. Bhavya, you were spot on when you said the task is to build quickly, to build reliably, standardize, and give a really good product. All right. Make it like the motor car product. That's the challenge of design and construction put together. Now we come up against a problem of, if you do concrete, precast concrete way, etc., we have a difficulty from the thermal comfort point of view and from flexibility point of view. Do you think there's room for innovative work. Supposing we put down certain regulations about internal flexibility of space, U values of outer walls, U value of the roof, etc. All of these regulations are put down, and you have to now meet those regulations. Let me give you an example. I have a friend in France who's building herself a house. She says now she has to meet embodied carbon standards, which means she can't put an RCC slab in her house. No way, can't do it. She has to build it out of timber. Everything has to be built out of timber. Okay? Because they're serious about reducing embodied carbon. And they put down those regulations. And people are innovating. The market is catching up. So do you think, and I know your father is already on this path, there's a real role for building technologists, designers, architects to get into an innovation space to meet this challenge?
Yes, of course. We have been working with concrete because that is the only known material to civil engineers, well-known material, most tested, and been used for nearly 100 years now. And in spite of the negatives that come along with using concrete in building, we do not have an alternative material yet, which is tested enough, reliable, and can be made cost effective. We do not have. That's the only reason we are all sticking to delivering a quality product consistently only to concrete. So having said that, concrete also is not the only option, and we should be able to, if not completely change, but at least come with hybrid buildings. Like EPS is one that we were venturing on. It is just one part of what we are thinking of for the future, where your concrete also can come down the moment you design the structure weight itself to come down, and that can happen with lighter weight materials. Wherever you can bring in lightweight materials like ASE blocks or the EPS panel technologies, or there are many materials that we can venture out, which may not be 100% replaceable for the building, but partly also if you replace, your building structure weight is going to come down, which also eventually bring down your cost and also the thicknesses of your structural elements. So that way we can definitely optimize the cost.
Yeah, certainly. So if you put yourself to it, I think you'll find a solution.
Yes.
I'm glad that, serious technologies. Her father is a brilliant engineer, absolutely brilliant engineer. I went to see the production plant, very impressed. And the experiment is right now. So I think we look forward to some possible solutions. Last question to you, Anjani. As a woman, all right, in this field, designing homes, having designed, especially that last project that you showed, what would you say from the point of view of low-income ladies or women who are managing their homes and looking after small children? What would be their approach or their demand? What is their salient demand from their home environment? What do you think? And how do you think designers or policy or regulations could possibly address that?
So honestly, as we were discussing yesterday again, I think it is very important for these affordable houses to be close to the city centers, or at least like not too far from the city centers, because especially for females, what happens is they're dividing their time between their work and their homes. So they don't want commute to eat up that time. And this I'm saying from my practical experience, trying to sell our homes to LIG community around me. So that's what I've heard, that zyada dur nahi jana. So that's one thing that, like Sir said, if we could have certain zoning regulations where within the city boundaries we could have affordable housing zones, that's one thing. The location of the project, I think, is very important. Secondly, the 11 shops that we were talking about, these shops should be more or less trying to cater to the basic necessities of their everyday life. So again, they don't have to go too far to fetch milk or vegetables or things like that. Apart from this, I think having common spaces to sit, common spaces for children to play is again something that is very important to females, because that's how they get time for themselves, because their children have some other place to go to. So I think these are the three features which could come as very important to females. I just want to add one thing, like that's not very related to females, but yesterday, as Grisha brought up, now that I think of it, having a common space to isolate during times of COVID, or having a common space for people to go sit during a heat wave for those who don't have air conditioners is extremely important, and is something which we don't usually incorporate in our designs. And as I mentioned during the presentation, I think we are going to use up the banquet space to do so, because these homes, it's impossible to isolate. Like it's a 1 BHK, 2 BHK, and 4 to 5 people living in it. So yeah, that's kind of on the females as well, but yeah. Thank you.
I just wanted to know what the price point of the projects are. Just to contextualize this.
Yeah. So for our project, the 1 BHK is priced around, the 1 BHK, which is a 45-meter square carpet, is priced around 22 lakh, and the 2 BHK is priced around 28 lakh.
Yeah. So ours is around 2 BHK of 650 carpet, and it's priced in Mysore. It's priced around 36 to 38 lakhs.
Very got an idea. Well, I think with that we have to close this discussion. I want to thank both of you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And Mr. Lal. I would now request everyone to proceed to the hall for a small tea break. 10-minute tea break. We'll be back here at 12. Thank you. Welcome back, everyone. We will now be starting our panel session, Challenges and Opportunities in Healthy Affordable Housing, moderated by Mr. Ashok Lal. It is my great pleasure to invite on stage our esteemed panelists. I would like to begin by introducing our first panelist, Ms. Mukta Nayak. Ms. Nayak, a fellow at the Center of Policy Research, is an architect and urban planner. Her research interests include housing and urban poverty, urban informality, and internal migration, as well as urban transformations in small cities. Prior to joining CPR, she worked with Micro Home Solutions on several community-based interventions to improve housing in informal settlements. At CPR, she focuses on understanding the links between internal migration and urbanization in the Indian context. Ma'am, please welcome on stage. Thank you so much for joining us today, ma'am. Our next panelist is Mr. Tanmay Tathagat. Over the last 30 years, Mr. Tanmay has worked on issues of climate change mitigation and sustainable development, building energy efficiency, green buildings, standards, and labeling in Asia, Africa, and United States. He leads the Environmental Design Solutions, EDS, team of multidisciplinary professionals working on projects that focus on sustainable solutions for the built environment. Their work includes designing buildings that are contextual, climate responsive, and focus on the comfort and well-being of occupants, all with the smallest possible environmental footprint. Mr. Tathagat, I welcome you today. Our next panelist is Mr. Tarun Garg. Mr. Garg holds the position of Principal and Director at RMI India Foundation. There, he spearheads an integrative design and energy analysis team dedicated to advancing the decarbonization of urban areas and constructed spaces. With a diverse background spanning more than 15 years, he possesses expertise in various disciplines, including research, policy formulation, and execution, as well as program development and implementation. Mr. Garg, I welcome you on stage. Thank you for joining us today. Our next panelist is Mr. Shaunak Ray. Mr. Ray is an architect, project manager, and business strategist by training. After 2 decades of work in the Asia-Pacific region across healthcare groups, consultants, and real estate developers, he thrives today in a role within a team in the world's largest development financial institution, championing sustainability and decarbonization in buildings with a focus on impact investments into scalable and green housing solutions. Mr. Ray, thank you so much for joining us today. Please come on stage. Joining us online from Monash University, Australia, is Dr. Dinesh Bhandari. Dr. Bhandari is a dedicated early career public health researcher with specific interest at the intersection of global environmental health and infectious diseases. His research focuses on evaluating the health risks stemming from climate change and formulating sustainable adaptation strategies to safeguard human well being in the face of its impact. He has experience working with large data sets, particularly in attribution science, to implicate the impacts of environmental determinants in human health. Dr. Bhandari, it is a pleasure to have you with us today. I would now request Mr. Lal to begin the session.
Thank you, Nirupa. So let's see how to go about this. We are looking at the future. We are not looking at the past, we are looking at the future. And we are definitely going to see temperature rise everywhere. And I can tell you that in our recent survey last year during the heat wave in Ahmedabad, we measured temperatures above the roof of some of the buildings. They were reaching 50 degrees centigrade. And definitely urban heat island is kicking in forcefully. And so urban situations are seeing much higher heat wave effects than out in the hinterlands. And we are seeing a certain pattern of urban development continuing to grow. So having worked for a long time now, Tanmay, in coping with what is the existing situation and talking about energy efficiency and reduction of the carbon footprint, from that perspective for so long, as we look into the future, now we have to turn it around to look at who is really suffering and what we need to do about it. So how do you think the future needs to be addressed? What more needs to be done, more than ENS, more than the green rating systems, more than the policy framework as it exists today? What more?
Well, first of all, I think you've done a wonderful job of providing some of those linkages in decision making, which go beyond the traditional way of looking at housing and health and infrastructure and everything as different entities, in a way that those are governing entities, and ideally they need to talk to each other to come towards a common objective. But even in small things where there's a direct contradiction between what is there in terms of the ideal design for a community or a city from a health perspective, is the opposite of what, say, a housing policy will talk about. So, but these are still at a small scale. Now, when we have our national target, let's talk about that as a net zero. How do you get there? And you bring in the question of carbon. Even if I reduce all of our discussions, even health can be reduced to carbon, because there is a healthcare cost, which is ultimately the intensity of hospital beds, intensity of healthcare, that can all be driven down to that, unless there is an integrated decision making of, is a new housing project going to cause a diversion from our target of going to net zero, or actually contributing to the target of net zero? You will see a lot of this convergence happening, right? So we have no ideal mechanism of doing so right now. Unfortunately, this is still one decision at a time, one transaction at a time. But even those decisions and discussions are not happening. So I would say, if one were to look at the lens of climate and what you talked about, well-being of people, every decision that is taken from a policy down to the placement of a window or the finish of the floor, you would get there. These are tough things to do. Metrics are not easy. And I'm very glad that at least some of these things have been reduced to specific metrics. But this needs to be done more and more. So my last point is that this needs to be done at two levels. You don't expect every project to go through and looking at climate change mitigation and say, okay, how do I now decide the size of my window? So those things have to be reduced into codes and standards and best practices, which are backed up by enough awareness amongst people who are inhabiting this, that there is a reason for these things to happen. So therefore you can ask for it or demand it, and if it's not there, then it's something missing from the service or the quality that you're looking for. But at the same time, at the highest level, that integration must happen. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Tanmay. I want to come to Tarun, to you. Yeah, I'll hand over my mic to you. From an institutional structures point of view, we talked about, he said that if different departments talk to each other, if you can align their objectives, then the right answers and the solutions would tend to follow. As RMI, who have taken on a global task of addressing governments, addressing big players in real estate, for instance, local government level also, you face a certain institutional structure. From the point of view of institutional realignment, I mean, what has been your experience, and what do you feel could be the catalyst or the trick that begins to make happen what Tanmay was talking about? What is your recommendation?
Good afternoon, everyone. First of all, it's an honor to share a stage with you. I still remember when I began my career in 2009-10. I started my journey in Terry, and we audited one of the buildings designed by Professor Ashok Lal. I think so. It's an honor for me to share the stage with you, and Tanmay as well. I think there are sort of we call as legends in our field, and so I think I'm from RMI, Rocky Mountain Institute, and as he mentioned, 40-year-old organization, globally started our journey from US, and our founder Emily Lovins is sort of called as Einstein of energy efficiency. And I'm just sharing a brief background about him because it's important for you to understand the organization I'm representing. So he constructed his home at net zero home in one of the coldest regions on the planet, that's Colorado, 40 years back. So I think the organization has been talking about energy efficiency for almost 40 years now, and we have a huge team in US. Almost 70-80 people are working there on this issue we are talking about. So coming back to the question you have asked Professor Ashok Lal, I was also part of the white paper, which is sort of released today as well. So I think what we have seen in this white paper that has also been mentioned here is there are three sides of human health. We have defined, one is physical health, one is social health, and the third part is psychological health. And the topic or the we are looking at thermal comfort, we are looking at urban heat. That falls under the category of physical health as one of the important element. There are other elements to it as well. In terms of institution, in terms of challenges, or in terms of implementation, as highlighted by one of the previous speakers as well, policy, according to me, and this has also been mentioned in this white paper, there are a lot of policies that already exist right now. So I don't think we need new policies. What we need is enhancement of these existing policies. As I'm speaking, I think India is revising its energy conservation building code, and it's amending by including embodied carbon into it. Similarly, we have a lot of policy instrument exists right now, but what we don't have right now is how can we integrate some of the issues related to urban heat. And so one of the projects we are doing in Chennai, for example, like cool roof, he has highlighted, how can it become mainstreamed in the overall city planning, in the overall construction and design planning, how it can be mainstreamed. This is a simple solution that can be done. Then there are various other solutions that can be also looked at. I'm not talking about the solutions here. How can we create market for these solutions at the city level or at the private sector level? As he highlighted, we are also working with one of the largest real estate developer in the country, and I think I forgot your name, but as you mentioned, I think one of the issues with the developer is cost of land and availability of land. So I think what you have been telling us, sir, is absolutely right. But the real issue is the availability of land and cost of land is quite, availability is not there and the cost is very high. So eventually they are going, beyond 4 stories, 5 stories, up to 20 stories, whether it's affordable housing or whether it's luxury homes. So within this constraint, how can we drive the implementations of available solutions? So that's an important challenge we are trying to solve through the work we are doing with Lodha and through the work we are doing in Chennai. So what we have learned so far is we need to have proper procurement methods at the city level. Procurement method, what I mean here is, we all know schedule of rate exists. We all know there are tender documents, technical specifications. So how can these available interventions become part of these documents? So that, if PWD or CPWD or any other builder is planning to construct any building, he's not he's not facing the issue of that he's not aware of the available interventions. So that's how I am looking at it. And in this overall journey, I think we have Shonik, who is representing IFC. I think cost of green premium will also become very important. We are talking about low embodied carbon cement and steel in buildings or in urban areas. But what about the cost of these materials and technologies? So I think that's how we are looking at the entire ecosystem.
So that brings you in, Shonak. IFC, and let's say you represent the financing community in a big way. We now know that all international finance that is coming to support affordable housing, all international finance, insists on it being tied to green performance, right? IFC is also driving that agenda. But internally, our state, our government is shy of mandating some very simple regulations. They think it should be a market-based solution. That's what they believe in. It hasn't worked for the last 10, 15 years. And very simple mandates have to be enforced. And you can drive your agenda much better if they were also mandated. So what do you say about first of all, the fact that globally green finance is coming to affordable housing, and if affordable housing has to grow substantially in the cities, they'll be dependent on green finance. And now there's a mismatch. He's talking about the extra cost of greening, and I'm talking about the fact that at very little or practically no extra cost, you can achieve the basic greening principles that you need just by mandating them. What do you think you can do as financiers with government and state?
Thank you, Professor Lal. First, of course, must applaud you for always getting the elephant out of the room. And thank you for inviting us over here. I begin with a quote from Victor Hugo saying, nothing's as powerful as an idea whose time has come. I represent the World Bank Group, like you famously said, and I'm part of International Finance Corporation, which works on the private sector investment of the World Bank Group. Among those sectors, some of the investments are done in the building sector, and the building sector investments, like other sector investments, are climate tagged, which means we have to figure out how are they going to meet green targets in these investments. And I'm actually very delighted to be here. Since from Girish's presentation, we saw that out of the people that you're recommending to, Edge is mentioned there, and I think I'm here. So that's as serious as we are. And I would really need that copy of that slide, even before the report comes, so that we can get started working on it. Because the only one friend that we don't have in the entire ecosystem, where we are all collaborating actually, is time. Apart from that, I think we are open, and everybody is actually in this ecosystem open to collaborate, everybody. That's how big the challenge is, and that's the only way to get ahead to it. So, Professor Lal, what I liked best about your efforts was that chipping away at the battles that we can win. It's a huge task. Quite a few of its solutions are there, but it's awareness. It's people who are willing to change to how to go forward and do it. And particularly to finance, finance has been an enabler for sure in many fields. It's happened in consumerism, and I'm sure it will happen. It's already happened in green buildings as well. We have many examples that we can give you at other markets. People like Colombia. Colombia has got more green housing than India has. It's a surprising statistics, but that's where we are at the moment. It's not something I'm proud of, but I'm thinking we'll get there sooner than later. So there is investment happening. So World Bank Group, as IFC, for instance, we work in helping banks and FIs to give out loans for green building projects. We have worked with developers, very largely in other markets, not so much in India. We're looking forward to figure out how these mechanisms can be done. It's actually a no-brainer to do commercial green buildings. There are reports from JLL which tells you that the people are already doing it. Any grade A developer in commercial real estate is doing green, whether they certify or not. It's a little challenging in housing, and I must also say, because we are also targeted on development impact, housing has got the most development impact, and about 40% of that is also self-built housing. So let's not forget about the housing where people are taking 10, 20 lakh rupee loans and building in the outskirts of Jodhpur, Jalna, and all these places. And there is huge amount of work that's happening. There's funds that IFC has committed and other people have committed as well through housing finance companies, and these companies are being enabled to figure out how their the consumers who take the loans can actually make it green. So the battle has now gone from certification of large projects where we charge anything from 3 lakhs to other certifications charge more, I guess, 5-6 lakhs to 10 lakhs on certifications, to down to a limit where it can be made easier for people to do it. Banks and FIIs are coming forward to actually take that cost. It's still a pilot project. They're used. I think it's a tip of an iceberg. I was in this building about a month ago where NHB had conducted a forum, so you also there, and the question came from the audience saying the myth still persists that a green house is actually expensive, more expensive than non-green house. So my job at the green building team is to debunk that myth. So if you design it well early enough, today you can actually build a greenhouse than a non-greenhouse. I mean, technically you can do that. I mean, theoretically you can do that. We have a tool for it. We can talk more in that detail in the next round of questions. But suffice to say that even the financial entities need to also change. It's not that only designers need to change or the policymakers need to change, which is why these recommendations do matter. There is an amount of so there is a lot of reform happening in World Bank as well, with a new president coming in. We are talking about eradicating poverty in a livable planet. Again, I'm not an official spokesman on those of either for World Bank or IFC. But there is intent, and there has been also a lot of intent from other agencies to put funding in it. There has been funding which takes care of the risk which is there between what people are funding today for affordable funding and what developers are funding. So those are happening as we speak. It's not happening in a big way in India. The whole idea, as Tarun has put, is to how to mainstream this. So the idea is to mainstream the tools, debunk the myths, mainstream finance, availability of it, scale it up, and also how is it that we can make skills available. I think Bhavya spoke about the skill issue. Absolutely, it's a skill issue. When you go to construction ground, there is an issue about material availability, and all of these are the various touch points of the elephant that we're talking about. They need to be addressed, and that's where the recommendations really come into play. Thank you.
Thank you, Shaunak. My one question is still outstanding. What can financial institutions do vis-a-vis government policy? We'll come back to that. I think I'll now go back to Professor Bhandari. Is he there? Up on the internet somewhere? From Monash University. Can I ask you to share your thoughts sitting at Monash University and looking at a wider global scenario, especially of developing countries, the impact of the environmental impact of climate change and the impact on urban communities of climate change. What would you say Or can you cite me some examples of what's happening in other parts of the developing world, of the global south, where you can see policy and regulation moving in a positive direction, it's a well-organized manner? Or any other thoughts from a global perspective that you can share with us with reference to what we are trying to do here in India?
Thank you very much, Professor Lal. It's really an honor to share this platform with heavyweight dignitaries standing there. And it was kind of intimidating for me at first, but now I have got my team leader, Professor Jaina Tompkins, here with me. So a bit of strength to answer all these questions together. So I'd like to invite Professor Tompkins to join in this conversation. So although I've been working in Monash for last 1 year, I'm from same part of the world. I'm actually from Nepal. So I've spent 30 years of my life in Nepal, and I have seen similar conditions to India. So just like India and Nepal, we have similar conditions, like particularly with the changing scenarios of climate change and increasing frequency of heat waves and increasing mortality rate and increasing risks. So what the public health community can do and can help the urban development community here is like actually what we can do from our side, and what has been done from public health community is like monetizing the impact, or like for policymakers and for investors, it's more important to learn like what will be the impact of their investment and what will be the return. So in this context, there has been lots of research done globally. So I would like to share a very nice example of a tool that has been created by University of Harvard. So what the Harvard has done is like in their ongoing project called Co-Benefit of Built-in Environment, they have designed a tool. So what the tool does is like it gives you the output of the investment, actually like the return for the energy consumption, the reduction in energy consumption in terms of health and climate benefit. So what they have done is in their model, they have included two different components. So the first component is like switching from the non-renewable source of energy to renewable source of energy. So what it does is like the first benefit is reduction in emission, carbon emission, and the next is like a reduction in exposure to air pollution due to the use of other source of fuel, such as fossil fuel. So using these two input in their model, so what they have done is like they have calculated the reduction in premature mortality, premature death attributable to exposure to air pollution, and then the gain from the reduction in carbon, and they calculate the return. So if I can share the screen very quickly, I can show the model that they have. Okay, so it's interesting. So if my screen is visible, so here's the model that the team has developed. So like I said, they feed in the energy efficiency and the reduction in emission, and then reduction in exposure to air pollution. So it's a two-way. So what they have done is like the climate benefit as well as the health benefit, and they immediately, instantaneously give you the return in terms of monetary value. So I think like global health community in this context of developing sustainable housing can contribute in the similar fashion. So what we can do is like we can create a multi-model, or like replace different indicators in this model. Like air pollution can be replaced with the thermal comfort and gain in health, and then it can instantaneously give you the return. And I think it will be more easy for the marketing perspective to encourage like people, the buyers and the investor to invest in this kind of sustainable and green habitat creation.
Okay,
So yeah.
Professor, we can't actually, some of us sitting in the discussion panel are unable to view the screen directly. But nevertheless, I think we've got the idea of the model, and it's a very useful tool. The idea of monetizing the benefits of certain kinds of investments in relation to health and well-being, and making that a case, making a business case out of it. I think that's very useful. Maybe we'll have a separate session sometime with you to understand that for our research team here.
So anything on top of this, like Professor Jarina wants to add?
Yeah, so Zarina, would you please come in? And as the head of the Department of Public Health at Monash, would you like to add your comments and tell us what your department is doing in this direction?
Thank you kindly. I just would like to make a slight correction. I'm actually not head of the Department of Public Health School at Monash. I'm an associate professor and a research lead for climate change and sustainable healthcare at the Faculty of Medicine, Nursing and Health Sciences. Firstly, thank you for the honor of speaking to you today, and my apologies that I couldn't join in earlier due to another meeting. So in reality, my observation has been within many of these policies is that they still continue to function in silo. There is a really lack of holistic approach to actually integrate health as a main component of the policy, so that when you actually look at the cost-benefit ratio, that the aspects of health and impacts of climate change and health in particular are integrated in this space. Fundamentally, when it comes down to cost-benefit analysis that is actually being conducted, that alone is then impacted further down by gendered voices, First Nation voices, for example, that are often missing in these particular discussions. Looking at this component as well, one of the fundamental components that are again absent is environmental determinants of health. So many of these policies, while they target to sort of address the net zero component, which is a reduction of carbon production overall, whether it's through greener buildings or whether it is through changing healthcare systems, for example, to reduce the carbon emissions, fundamentally that view has to go beyond that so that it is actually inclusive of biodiversity, the productive land, for example, that exists in that settings, but also those individual voices where people can contribute to the climate change outcomes in their own rights. Fundamentally, many solutions sit within our community, and I think policies don't reflect that.
Thank you very much. I'd like to come to Mukta. Mukta, we've just recently come out of COVID, all right? And it seems to be rearing its head in different parts of the world once again. From your work and your research that you've been doing so far, looking at poor communities in urban areas, where do you think, and in what way do you think regulation about affordable housing can be tweaked to protect residents against the rise of such endemics once again?
Thank you, Professor Lal. Let me go back to your first provocation that we are thinking about the future. And where is the future of urbanization? What is the future of urbanization? So if you back up to that, a lot of the questions that we're talking about today is focused on metropolitan, very large cities in India. But much of the urbanization that we will see in the future is going to happen in small and medium cities. That's one part of it. In fact, even in the Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana, the most successful and the highest sort of, in terms of number of units component, is the beneficiary-led construction, which Tanmay already sort of indicated, the self-built housing component, which is actually going to be the biggest contributor both to the sort of creation of more affordable housing built up space and the biggest contributor to decongestion, because a lot of the self-built housing has the ability to go vertical, but is currently not under the kind of regulatory environment that we can imagine for formal construction, and what your report and what your interventions are currently focused on. So I think expanding the scope of our vision, and this benefits the urban poor. I mean, I asked the price point question of our developer friends precisely to underline the point that while developers entering into the affordable housing segment is absolutely necessary, the urban poor, if we are to believe that building sort of eradicating poverty in a livable planet is sort of, I like the big message in that sentence. If that's our ultimate objective, alongside the imperatives that are facing us, the challenges of climate change that are facing us right now, then the category of people that we really need to worry about are the category that walked back away home from cities during the pandemic in India. Those are unorganized workers, those are construction workers, domestic workers, industrial workers, and not all of them were below the poverty line. Many of them would have been technically middle class in terms of their household incomes, especially if you combine their rural and urban household incomes, because those incomes are split across farm and non-farm modes of work. So we're talking about a set of people who are in the unorganized sector, who can't take formal mortgages from the market to build, to even if they have the income, they can't really access the mortgages to get into formal housing. They are forced, therefore, to depend on the auto construction sector, much of which is in a gray zone in terms of legal tenure. And I'm not saying that we have to stick to a slum, non-slum binary category here. We can think of urban villages, resettlement colonies, a lot of kinds of informal or unplanned neighborhoods where tenure improvements are not very difficult to do. So you get the drift of where I'm going. We need to think beyond formal constructed high-rise housing and the thing that high-rise and density is the only way to think about congestion. No, congestion was and the pandemic mostly affected congestion of a different kind, which is low-rise high-density congestion, which is as much of a problem because there the issue is of basic services, of retrofitting and upgrading informal or other kinds of unplanned settlements. So it's a different kind of challenge, perhaps outside the ambit of this particular white paper, but equally urgent. Definitely, if we think about the large numbers of people who come under that, and if we go beyond metropolitan cities where the big urban change is happening now, then we also need to think about the awareness aspect, which also both Shaunak and Tanmay referred to, because then we're not talking about the interventions coming top down from the central to the state to the city, but we're actually talking about what people are doing regardless of what the policies are saying. And so the entire intervention has to be thought of as bottom up or community managed. And this is also something that I think both the panelists on the previous panel brought up, that ultimately it's the people who are inhabiting these housing and how they manage their housing and their neighborhoods going forward that are going to, it's not just about what you're putting into the project right now. So even in the self-built segment, there's a lot of incomplete work on what regulation can do in this segment, who needs to be educated, what kind of contractor class, what kind of, who needs to be educated and who needs to be brought into this conversation to make whatever changes we can in that segment. And then how is that housing actually managed and what's the role of regulation there? So here, the regulation may not be at building level per se. It may be a more neighborhood level intervention that you may want to start with, but there are already beginnings of that. I mean, those have been conversations in the traditional housing sector for a very long time. And I think those conversations can be framed in the context of the climate challenge. They already are. CPR had, along with FCDO, done a report on how built form and cities and urbanization can think about future pandemics, and that's a good reference point. It's on our website. I can share more details on it, where some of this had been, we thought through some of this at the scale of the neighborhood and the cities. So I'll stop there, but basically that the framing has to be a little beyond formal housing.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. It has to be beyond formal housing. And of course, we now know for a fact that the rate of growth of the small and medium towns is much more rapid than the big cities. It is an indicator of the pathology of the big city, by the way, where life is becoming more and more stressful. In Bombay, people are spending 2.5 hours to get to work.
Not just, actually, manufacturing is moved out of our largest cities. It's all sitting in the villages and in the peri-urban.
So it's happening much more in the small and medium cities. That's where the growth is happening. And it is there, I think, the meeting of bottom up and top down actually has to be worked out. And I just want to ask both Shaunak and Tanmay, because Shaunak, you've got an IFC program through one of your agencies looking at self-built housing and how to support that towards green construction. That's kind of a financing agency-led institutional framework towards greening of self-built housing. All right. And if I ask Tanmay this about the application of regulatory frameworks to self-built housing or the frameworks for space planning or street planning in the suburbs of small towns where opportunities for employment are growing rapidly. This coming together of bottom up and top down, how do you visualize it working? First, Tanmay, your thoughts, and then to Shaunak.
Right. So, absolutely, the areas which are the most affected by the bad effects of all the things we talked about are largely not regulated in that sense. You don't need building permits to make your own house in most cities if you just, So, uh, that whole approach of, while I also talked about governance and regulation and policy, uh, we all think of this top down approach, right? Just pause for a second and see uh, how does, like, if this policy and the government is a dinosaur, then if you dissect the dinosaur and see what are the parts, what are the organs, uh, the decision making, and I've been looking at policies of various kinds in the last 20 years, whether it's an appliance standards or building codes, and government does not come with its own perspective of anything. They are based on the perceptions of people who feed that information. And if I'm specific to let's say the building sector, it's the professionals, the associations, the builders who all inform the MLAs and the MPs and the councillors. So, 20 years ago when we started working in Pune, the first eco housing project that came out, we realized that the municipality was basically composed of a lot of people who had links with the building sector, councillors and others, and they all had direct experience of working on projects. And they knew that if something has to change, whether it's a policy on land use or something else, it'll affect their business and it'll also affect the market. So that feedback, of course, goes all the way from that field to the prime minister's office, right? That's how the system works, the democracy that so I feel that every time I talk about an external sort of source of angst for this, it's actually within the profession. So when you talk about the recommendations that you're making and you go to BIS, if, for example, this would make common sense and our profession, people who are represented in the committees would agree, I see no reason why BIS would say, no, we won't do this, right? You will have a bigger battle convincing the architects, the planners, and the developers of this than you will have the BIS committee. So I think a lot of it is also to do with what we do to shape perceptions and create these, I would say, myths about someone else trying to regulate. It's the same goes with finance. You look at them, finance, what are they trying to do? They will only figure out something that the market is ready to take up. They won't take a position that is contrary to their own business of lending money, right? This whole climate commitment is also part of a larger, because you can't really access a lot of finance that is flowing through these financial agencies unless there is commitment to mitigating climate change. So it's an imperative. That is why it is being done. And therefore, where is that coming from? It's from individuals and people and associations and professions like us. So I see that there is a lot of discussion, but we don't we are not really looking inwards in many of these things. At the same time, there is a lot of hope. Uh, I can talk about a number of projects, but one specifically that stands out. Right now, we are working with the Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs in developing the thermal comfort standard for affordable housing and an action plan. And many of the recommendations that you have here are exactly the same. For example, better ventilation, natural light, certain amount of thermal isolation from the environment, depending on where you are. And all of these things, when they go from multiple sources and we say this in one voice, there is no reason that they'll not happen. So I just point the finger back to ourselves and our professions and all of us to say that, this is, if as citizens we agree that this makes sense, I don't see a reason why the policy will not follow sooner or later.
Professor, I'll take question in two parts. First part, I'll try to answer last question. So financing green has been there for a long time. We've heard NHB saying they were sitting on KfW money and they couldn't get the projects to do it. So I think what's really looming large is maybe there is no clarity on the taxonomy of what is green in this country. I mean, there are things the way we define green over here, and they're probably different. There needs to be something simpler, something more universal. That's something that the government can lead and do. Because that, and I know for a fact that the climate funding that needs to come needs carbon data. They need to know how much carbon is going to get saved or wasted in a project. Without that, nobody's going to believe, and it needs to be certified in a certain standardized way. So these two are the first precursors of a thing that needs to happen for what the finance can do, and that is they can then begin what is called sustainability linked bonds. This is what Tanmay is talking about. How is it that on a long term you will show that, okay, I'm achieving the green and therefore give me the money at a better rate or a better terms than the other kind of financing available. So green bonds have happened, but sustainable linked bonds are a different beast. I don't think much has happened in India in terms of the building sector so far. It happened in Vietnam last week. It's happened in Singapore, and there's no reason why it shouldn't happen. There are works afoot on this, and we'll probably see something happening on that regard. Much of it's going to happen in the housing space, obviously because of the high amount of impact that we can see. Coming back to the second part of the question, which is the self-built housing bit of it, it's still a pilot project. I must say it's a pilot because of the kind of scale that we're doing it, vis-a-vis the kind of opportunity that it has. It has actually got global ramifications. Luckily, it's sort of seeing in India the traction that's happening. To cut it short, basically, this is fund that's going into the HFCs who then lend it out to their consumers. It's a choice that they give. By the way, the marketing of it is done by the actual lending officers on ground. So here is the issue: how does a lending officer understand what is green? Then how does a lending officer then tell the consumer that, do you want to take green? This is mujhe kya milega, or what will I get? So then figure out, okay, then you give the choice to them. And so there's a whole lot of awareness and education of this process. By the way, these have been done. So we have already, and then we certify it. Now, who goes to check and certify? Because their lending engineers are actually going. Do they need to find out what they are? Do they need to go on a very detailed modeling? Luckily, we have this tool, which we developed the last 9 years. Being a financial institution, we have to develop a whole new tool called Edge, which is being now used across 80 countries to make the green building standardization, the calculations and certifications easier. That's precisely what without making it weaker. Now, how to make that into a format that can now work for much smaller ticket sizes at a scale and a level without losing its quality, to be able to give actually these certificates. So there are certifications. We had the ceremony over here. Mr. Hota actually gave out these individual certifications to actual homeowners of Awas. So there's Awas, Aadhaar, Home First. We just invested. IFC has invested in IFL as well. There's a lot of work happening. So there is work afoot on ground, and we had to basically figure out and make the definition of green much simpler. It's boiled down to 7-8 things that somebody needs to do. By far, I don't think the materials issue has been solved. It's still something that's a lot of work to do. But now the person who's doing that 15 lakh home or 20 lakh home in the outskirts of Jodhpur can say what is green. And you talked about, so in edge certification, if you are 20 edge certified, you are 20% better than energy. So 20% better than energy means, obviously, if I have a office complex, a 1 lakh rupee energy bill, I should get 80,000 rupees bill. Now let's say somebody has got a 200 rupees bill and is going to get a 160 rupees bill. Now, is that going to entice that person to build? I keep asking this question to my colleague. Apparently not. What really is going to help that person is that the thermal comfort aspects, because radiative heating is the biggest aspect, as you know, you've been in the field for so long. So when he or she feels that my house is going to be cooler than my neighbors, that gives a very different kind of a FOMO, very different kind of a pull factor for other people to say, oh, that's a greenhouse. That's what you mean by greenhouse, not just plants. So there are very interesting things that are play out of here, which we are learning while we are working on ground. And these are not even just financial aspects. Finance is there already. We are figuring out how is it that the financial will eventually flow and be actually workable, because that's what we are figuring out, because it's mobilization that's going to really matter. So we are very hopeful to figure out what this is going to be. But again, this green funding and thing has to go to developers such as you were sitting over here to figure out how this can be done. And then, of course, to the policy change makers. See, government now takes probably the easier way out of giving FSI. It's and yeah, I mean, I think most consultants who have worked in this field feel that this should go away. Well, it's like giving you some incentive to go and jog in the morning and say you're going to be healthy. I guess it works for some people in the housing sector because you get to build more FSI. But on long run, Mandan's in the logic of this. There are many other ways the government can think about doing productively. In Colombia, for instance, there is a GST waiver on green materials. Provided, of course, we have a taxonomy. What is a green material? So I think there is a lot of work that can be done on the government side of things, made it a lot of easier. For instance, definition of. So do we know how much of green buildings we have in India today? Where is the data for that? Now, can somebody as a think tank carry it out? I don't. That data is there, but when people come to invest in something, they need data. They need the carbon data, they need the market data, they need the ROI data, and so on and so forth. We have certain tools for it, like the EDGE, which is benefit. So that's climate mitigation. And Grisha, you spoke about climate adaptation. We have a tool called BRI, which is Building Resilience Index. We have it in Philippines, we've done in the Caribbean. We're just figuring out how to get that in India because we need the underlying disaster maps. So once that comes on a building level, sitting on the desktop, it's a free to use app for users. You can figure out what's your carbon footprint, and you can figure out where you're standing in terms of disaster, in terms of building resilience in the face of impending weather disasters, or can you have operational continuity for it? How much money I need to go and do that? So this Edge software, this free to use app, actually gives you all the data, because we got the data from 65 cities inside it. It actually gives the data that in case you have to do 2% increase of green, when do you get the payback period? And the myth is to get 0% increase. So there is no rationale for you ever now to do a non-green building over the green building. So that's the fight we have. Thank you.
Yeah, well, brings me back to you, Mukta. You have the last word. Let me put it this way. What I'm learning here is that since there's going to be most housing for the affordable sector is going to be provided by more or less self-build or small-time developer. The small builder who does 3-4 stories on small plots of land, etc. So most of it is going to be done that way. All of this is located in some urbanizing or urban framework where there may be some very simple regulations. That's on the one side. So there is a meeting between self-build and an urban spatial regulatory framework where the way you build on your own plot is such that even if you've gone up to 4 stories after 10 years, your environmental quality is still protected and maintained. So there's one meeting point over there. The second meeting point is market operation, where people are having to raise loans to build their own houses. And if those loans come with the conditionality of certain kinds of performance of the building, which are very simply defined as in age. So that is another one where the financing mechanism and the tie to green or performance of the building to finance produces the right results. The third one is local practices, which local builders, local masons, local technicians, etc., local designers and architects also have to overall, develop and demonstrate that this can be done, and this produces the right results, which people are happy about. We're actually not talking about reducing energy consumption as standards of living will rise. From the present levels, by and large, we'll expect energy consumption in households to increase, but we can possibly reduce the carbon footprint of overall construction and reduce the demand, the latent demand for air-conditioned comfort in the future. That's what we can look forward to. So now, Mukta, can you imagine professional groups, institutional setups, municipalities, and the local populace moving into cities and building for themselves, coming together in some sort of a structure? Can you give it some shape? Can you give us some starting points?
That's a really tough one. That's like, but the ability of local governments to actually put such sophisticated collaboratives together is, I think, where we really need to focus. And I'm not saying that they necessarily have to be held by government. I mean, these are also collaboratives that can be initiated and held a little bit. So I'm basically talking about state society sort of relations, carrying on from the kind of vein that Tanmay was in, was already indicating. And here I think when we talk about participation or participative planning, we fall back on sort of imagined models and stories that we've heard, and it's very much about the larger master planning, land use planning kind of things. But really, in the model that Tanmay described, where professional associations and businesses and politicians who are already intermingled with those associations and businesses have a seat on the table, the community may not necessarily have a seat on the table. And I know I use the word community loosely here. It could mean 100 things to 100 people. So bringing that people part onto the table, who does it and at what scale that happens, has been sort of the stuff of I mean, basically this is the regional planner or the governance person's nightmare, right? That's been the toughest nut to crack. And if we combine it with what Shaunak was saying in terms of, okay, the market can realign itself if the incentives are clear and if there is uptake. If that's the starting point of that imagination, that we imagine that there are certain drivers or certain incentives that can be framed for this kind of an ecosystem, which is a self-built ecosystem, a small developer ecosystem, an ecosystem in which local practices or local practitioners are very invested in. If we imagine that there are incentives, then those incentives need to be articulated through such a collaboration. So I think that's where policy can play a role, in the sense of first encouraging the articulation or opening a window to say that yes, this larger ecosystem of where we can push in the formal space because it's regulatable. So we're doing that now, but the future window is going to be to open this window. But for now, we don't know what incentives are going to work. So can there be an institutional, a model institutional mechanism, a pilot institutional mechanisms that are set up in some cities to demonstrate that the collaboration can first define what those incentives might be for that local regional ecosystem, and then we can move from there. And this has been done in other kinds of spaces. I mean, maybe not so much in climate, but that also helps us then shift or at least get into the discussion on materials, which has been a long-standing issue. How do you get people to change behavior? But look at sanitation. That was a huge behavioral change conversation, and policy pushed it from the bottom and the top and got it to move. Look at tenure security, huge conversation. Slums will always be slums. We will never be able to get around the tenure security problem. And now state after state is somehow getting into that space in whichever way they can and changing So they've completely debunked the myth that it's not possible to improve tenure security even in medium-sized or large cities, especially now with Odisha going into Bhubaneswar and those kind of spaces. So I mean, I won't trump one state as an example, but that's happening in other states too. So I think previously held notions of sort of policy impasses that could never be broken are being broken. And this can be broken too, but there has to be a clearly articulated pathway of which scale this has to happen, who can be the initiators. We're also very clear that we don't have the state capacity at the local level for the local state to be the initiator or the holder of these conversations. So then the state has to empower or nominate some sort of actor to take that lead and say that we will participate or we will commit to participating in the process if such and such kind of actor can take the lead. So there are many sort of possibilities there, but broadly we need to have a clarity on what those incentive structures could be.
Professor, if I could just take a minute to add a few more
Yeah.
points. I take that point about demonstration. It's very, 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 very important. We wanted to find out if people can come together and do green buildings. Can young people see green buildings and green play fields and see, okay, this is how it looks like. That's how cool it is. We tried to figure out, because while we were young architects, there was hardcore doing building centers, but I think they moved on to infrastructure. So we can't find an entity. We're trying to talk to a few more as to can people palpably feel what a green building looks like and what its advantages are, to be so that a child can go back and say, it can be a pull factor saying, can I Papa, can you, or Mama, can you get me a green building, can we live in one, kind of thing. I mean, because if the aspirations change, it's not going to get into the consumerism. And then of course then everybody will say, oh, there's no money. Everybody will find an excuse not to do it, knowing fully well that we are going towards disaster. The other 2 points, that there are some solutions that worked. For instance, the LED bulb, the ESL, when they have procured it, they are doing work on fans, for instance. Right now, AEEE friends were telling us that they probably, if they don't get into it and get the 5-star ones, they'll end up buying 2-3 stars, which is actually not, it's a bad idea to do that. So we can agglomerate this demand. The demand exists, and I'd like to see them finish this BLDC fans, get the huge thing. Let BLDC fans become norm in edge. Like LED bulbs, nobody gets a credit for making green a building with LED anymore, because that's a norm. So when can it be a norm having BLDC fans? When can we have a similar thing happening? Let's say little things that people use in their homes, pumps, for instance, for water pumps. And if you do this, then people will choose green. They will vote by their feet, by the hard-earned tax-paid, money. They will choose green buildings. So demonstration is important. These kind of things are important.
Okay, thank you. So I'll just like to open up for a few questions from, or comments offered from the floor. Anybody wanted to raise some questions, or yeah, go ahead. First, tell us who you are.
Yes.
I think I have questions for almost everyone. So, my name is Vandana, and I work with an organization called Community Design Agency. And I'm a civil engineer and a materials researcher, and I work with a group of artists, architects, and designers. And we design and build spaces for what can be called as the bottom 10% of population. So I am the project lead for one of the PMAY projects in Ahmednagar district in Maharashtra. And we are building, it's a small number of houses in the larger picture, because we are building for 298 families. And a lot of things that was talked about in the white paper, we are trying to design and build homes, which pretty much is like the picture perfect implementation project for all the recommendations that are there in the white paper. And so this has been happening for the last 4 years or so. We completed one building, we still have 7 more buildings to go. And I have so many questions here right now, because I'll ask one in which I'll summarize a lot of things, because I have been firsthand involved with the community, because before starting the project, these were families. So we're talking about homes that are like 20 lakhs, 30 lakhs, but I'm talking about families who cannot afford a 6 lakh loan for their house because the family income is so low. And we are also building for families who are leprosy affected and who have been below poverty line for generations. So then coming from that, and we wanted to build something that is sustainable and as green as possible for them, while also providing adequate and resilient homes for the families. So I have been looking into materials, into technology, into green. I'm doing my edge expert right now because I wanted to know everything that is available for us. So one thing that you were talking about, a lot of policies and funds and everything. Shaunak, you were talking about a lot of funding options that are available. Yeah, sorry. So is there a place where we can access the information of all the funding sources that are available? Because right now I feel that it's very scattered and it's very difficult to go to one place to find the funding. And another thing, just one more question and I'm done. So one more to Tanmay. You were talking about green sustainability and all of that. So one question that I have is a lot of the guidelines and so a lot of the green certifications are based on point systems, and a lot of the point systems, the qualifiers are predominantly material based, is what I've noticed, facade and services and all of that. So when we are looking at such buildings, is there some way to, yeah, that's the project I'm working on. Yes. I just noticed that. So is there some way to incorporate vernacular technologies or locally sourced materials, and is there any certification? I know a lot about Edge and Griha. So is there some way to bring in those aspects into the certification itself? So these are the two questions that I have.
I have a very short answer for your first question. That's some question that's been asked so many people from me. It's a question that I ask myself. I'm in the process of collating it. I have bits and pieces to it. So it's like I said, like a jigsaw puzzle. People are doing it different places, and anything that we do in Edge, we put it public. So my internal mandate with my team is that, look, let's get this out. Let's get it out. People who are want to do Edge asking me for this. Consultants are asking me for this. Our certifiers are asking us for this because they're certifying and saying, hey, is there anybody getting the funding out of it? So it's a very valid question. Just watch this space. We're going to start putting up something soon because it's important. Thanks.
Yeah. No, similarly, on the question of certification for materials and technologies that are at maybe not fully tested, or there is a process, and we found that most of the rating system, even the ones that are as structured as Edge and LEED, but definitely the IGBC affordable housing and the Swagriha, they are more than happy to accommodate when you approach them with a very well structured question and a suggestion. So we found that, if there's something that you are, as an engineer or an architect, are able to put your point across, that this material or this process or this design is green, is better, is more sustainable, it meets the overall objective, most of the time they accept, and in fact it also triggers a change. So it's just that it needs to be put in a proper manner.
Yeah, thank you. I see Professor Gulecha over here, who's done some very important work in mapping the effect of heat waves on urban populations. I'd be, happy if you can contribute some of briefly, your insights into this whole thing, the built environment of cities, and your findings, which way we are going and what needs to be done.
Yeah, thank you very much, Professor Lal. And I think one of the green building, if you want to see, you can visit our beautiful campus, which is designed by Professor Lal. It is one of the finest campus of university across our country. Regarding, we are leading heat action plan, and Indian Institute of Public Health, Gandhinagar, is the one of the institute who has developed the Ahmedabad heat action plan and shown to the government that heat is affecting human health, and that's why the whole healthy building pictures, this comes into picture. So I think we have shown evidence that heat is affecting health, not only physical health, but social and psychological health as well. And the one thing which we are struggle with, the lots of municipal corporation, they don't understand this healthy building concept. it is very much clear that cool roof is, you're reducing energy as well as it is providing human health comfort. Like we have done 5,000 cool roof in the city of Ahmedabad, and we have data, we have evidence that it is reducing their disease burden, it is reducing mortality, morbidity. And because of that, now many of the state government is coming to us that please develop heat action plan for us, please demonstrate cool roof. So I think whatever sir has mentioned, that there is a urgent need to collaboration with health, because ultimately human health should not be compromised. Important effect, because the long term effect we will not see, that climate change it affect sea level everything, but immediate is it is affecting human health through thermal, through more number of vector borne disease, more number of waterborne disease. And stringent regulation is missing. Most of the municipal corporation construction site, there are lots of breeding of vectors, dengue, malaria, chikungunya, but no one is taking action. So we have to learn from other country like Sri Lanka. They have climate resilient buildings, they have very good they have they become malaria free in last 1 decade, they become malaria free. So we have to learn how we can reduce impact of this all the climate induced disaster on human health. And one of the, I think this white paper will definitely contribute. One thing I would like to mention, that it should be very easy, that A B C D, because it's very difficult for government officers, very difficult municipal officers to loss of metrics, and they just want whatever, where whenever we are going to hit XML, we just mention that 4 components are there. First component you have to do this, because they want minimal work, they want to implement many things, but they want that they should not be bothered much. So we have to, whenever we go to government, we should go with simple solution, A B C D, that's it. You have to do what would be your role, what would be our role. Thank you, sir. Thanks again.
Thank you. Pavitra, are you here? Yeah. So Pavitra is leading the cellular project, which is a long-term project. And one of the things about our project, of course, is that we are going to see its implementation in real on-the-ground building projects, and they have to be monitored over time. Last night, Pavitra was raising some serious concerns about the lack of monitoring and really seeing what the effect of what we are designing is. So Pavitra, your turn to say something.
Yeah. So at GBPN, actually, we are trying to see, like, we have lots of efforts which are taken at the organization levels in all possible directions. But even though when we have a policy which is mandated, or even if it is made aware of, when the policy has been implemented in a building, but it is not monitored, or it is not evaluated in a streamlined process over a long time, so that becomes again the same thing. It goes back on the track, and it is not really achieving a progress. So I just wanted to understand from all these experts, like, if anyone can take this question, like, how can we ensure that all our efforts are really progressing, and over the long time we are still seeing the results, and it becomes a new normal situation, that people are abiding by these kind of standards and recommendations derived from all these organizations. Yeah.
Yeah, I see clearly a role for institutions, whether it is SPA or it is IPH, say from the building side and from the health side, to actually have projects which are long-term monitoring projects. So these are the objectives, this is what we did, these are the results, and these are measured, whichever way you want to do it, long-term, so that the evidence base is prepared, and these policies and techniques of design or construction, materials, etc., begin to be fine-tuned to become more effective. Yeah. Okay.
Just a small point from my side. I think RMI established an accelerator with Lodha Group, and it's open for everyone. So I think one of the issues you have highlighted, we are also trying to solve there. So right now we have a energy data of 20,000 flats there, but I think we are more than happy to incorporate any suggestion you have, which you want us to look at, and sort of provide you the ground for testing out few solutions as well.
Sure.
That's great. So we would like this energy data to be long term, and then we would like SPA to host a center, for instance, where such energy data is brought together at one place where it can be analyzed by academic expertise, and this could also be shared with Monash University, for instance. So I think we need to develop that culture on the academic and research side too. Well, with that, I'd like to thank all of you. No point in trying to summarize all your words of wisdom. And now it is time to formally release this document. So can I ask Pavitra to join us, Dr. Galecha also to join us on the stage to release the document? Am I missing anybody else? No? You have to hold it the right way up, facing the camera. Yeah, here we are. Thank you very much. Thank you. And we, so these are your copies. These are your copies. And you deserve a gift in return for your efforts.
I'll also invite our guest speakers on stage.
Yes, come.
So, starting with Miss Anjani Patel. Miss Bhavya Shetty.
This one is going to Mysore.
Miss Mukta Nayak. Mr. Tanmay Tathagat. Mr. Tarun Garg. Mr. Shaunak Ray. Yeah, I would also like to extend our sincere thanks to Dr. Bandari and Professor Zarina Tompkins. Maybe we can share a plant.
For both of you.
Low carbon footprint.
Low carbon footprint.
Sent by a sailboat.
Thank you to all the panelists. Your presence has been very valuable to us today. I would now invite Pavitra Radhe, Project Manager at GBPN India, to invite her colleagues for the closing remarks.
So it is evident from all the discussions that we have a lot of efforts which are taken in all the directions possible to mitigate the climate change, and I believe that will surely make the ends meet very soon. And I now invite my colleague, Mr. Gautam Nagar, who is country manager at GBP in India, to offer his closing remarks. Over to you, Gautam.
Thank you so much, Pavitra, and thank you so much, everyone. As we reach the conclusion of today's gathering, I am rather filled with a sense of gratitude and optimism. Gratitude because for the invaluable contribution that we have received, from our partners, our esteemed panelists, and obviously our dedicated team at GBPN. And more importantly, optimism because I believe today we have lit a beacon, which will guide us through the pressing challenges of climate change and also social inequity. So, before I move on, if I have the permission of the timekeeper, just wanted to show a brief video of 29 seconds. I can see ABLA team nodding their head, but would kindly request you if you can guide me. And please excuse me, Zarina and Dinesh, because this video is in our local language, Hindi. Yeah, so I'll just take 29 seconds of your time because I feel this fits in really well with our thought process and may not be directly related to the climate change at all, but the people that we are talking about. So, just a small video.
महंगी गाड़ी चलाने वाला अक्सर पैदल घर जाता है। आपकी महंगी गाड़ी चलाने वाला अक्सर पैदल घर जाता है। करोड़ों की रखवाली करने वाला वक्त पे पगार नहीं पाता है। कभी कभी एक वक्त भूखा रहता है जो आपके लिए आधे घंटे में पिज्जा पहुंचाता है और बारिश में छत टपकती है उसके घर की जो आपके लिए बड़ी बड़ी बिल्डिंगें बनाता है।
So this is, these are the people that we are talking about mainly. The emotions are pretty simple and straightforward because we are sort of living in a parallel world wherein people who are privileged and well equipped, they are living one type of lifestyle, and parallelly these guys are also living their own lifestyle, and we know that they are facing a lot of problem. And to top it up, now we all have seen that climate change is also started to impact every one of us, and we are privileged to manage some portion of it. But when we talk about them, it's pretty evident that they need some sort of support, and that's where I believe you and I come in, the building professionals who have the privilege to learn about, get educated about the subject, and to give back to the society. And probably that is what the whole concept of this white paper talks about in large. In this white paper that we have launched, which obviously is a start, we intend to propose some implementable and most importantly the affordable solutions to ensure that even our urban poor friends can manage the impact of climate change. And the objective is not only to provide them with adequate indoor environmental quality, but also to ensure that their outdoor environmental quality is habitable. So therefore, friends, this white paper that got launched today is the first step in that direction. And for this journey, we are grateful for to the Monash University for helping us with the global perspective in this research, and to our expert committee members, including representatives from GBCI and IGBC. Then we have professionals from PHFI, Public Health Foundation of India, and also our independent consultant, Ms. Anukriti Pathak and Tarun Garg from RMI, for offering their specialized insights to our project. And most importantly, I would also like to thank our local expert partner, Ashok Bilal Architects and IIPH Gandhinagar, for shaping this vision. Mr. Lal was talking about in his opening remarks that can you do it? That's the question that we had for the team. And the team made it possible and gave the shape to a tangible reality. So, and like I said, it's just a starting, but a good step to take forward in this particular direction. Also, I would like to thank, special thanks to Anjani and Bhavya for their commitment to our cause. And of course, a big salute to our team at GBP in India and Australia for steering this ship through its foundational voyage. So, well, team, don't want to keep you away from your lunch. So, thank you so much for your time. And as I said, it's just the beginning and a lot of work that needs to be done. So, we are in the process of, developing this project in multiple phases. So, in order to keep yourself updated about this whole concept and the work that we're doing, please feel free to visit our websites. We are there on LinkedIn and Instagram as well, where continuous updates are given thanks to our comms team. And once again, thank you for your patience and participation and unwavering support. And we look forward to continue to engage with everyone on this project and many more that GVPN is doing in India. So thank you once again for your time. Really appreciate your patience. And thank you, Ashok sir, for leading this. Thank you.
Thank you, Gautam. On behalf of the organizing team, I would like to thank our panelists, guest speakers, and everyone in the audience for their time. May I request everyone to now join us for the lunch outside? Thank you. Also, apologies, there's a QR code on the screen. You may scan it to access the white paper.